like I remember at the end of Melinoe, I was just totally fucking exhausted, which was really interesting because it's funny that you brought up Epheltes because I had an entirely different song written that didn't make it onto the album. And I was so exhausted at that point that I was like basically convincing myself, even though I knew in my heart of hearts the song didn't belong on the album, it didn't fit with the rest. It was a good black metal song, but it just, the magic wasn't there. And then one night I was just noodling around, stuck in my fucking house as we all were during COVID, and I came up with the opening riff for Epheltes, and I'm just like plucking my guitar, not even plugged in, and I was like, oh, that's very haunting sounding.
Greetings, Legion, and welcome to episode 197 of Into the Necrosphere. This week, my good friend Naas Alcameth of Akhlys is back on the podcast to talk about the band, to give us an update on some of his other projects, including forthcoming records by Nightbringer and Bestia Arcana. We also spoke at length and quite candidly about the Akhlys creative process. We spoke about the pressure that he feels to create a worthy successor to a record as critically acclaimed as Akhlys' last album, Melinoe, and much, much more. It is an absolutely sensational conversation, a worthy sequel to our previous chat, and it is going to be coming your way very shortly. But before we get to that, Suffering are a UK-based black metal band who are about to release their new EP, Symphonies Diabolus. When it came to deciding on the perfect platform to launch the EP, they knew that there is no other place to do a world premiere than right here on Into the Necrosphere. So for your listening enjoyment, sit back and savor the sounds of Deceit, a wolf in sheep's clothing. You just listened to Deceit, a wolf in sheep's clothing by the UK-based black metal band Suffering. It's taken from their upcoming EP, Symphonies Diabolus. I will post a link to their Bandcamp in the description to the podcast, as always. So if you head over there and you buy yourself some music, then let them know that it was old Jackson at Into the Necrosphere who sent you. My friends, if you're new to the podcast and you've enjoyed what you've heard so far, then make sure that you grab the closest folding chair and beat the subscribe button on your streaming platform of choice until it begs you for mercy. Also, follow me on the socials, check out the Into the Necrosphere Teespring store, and then very importantly, make sure you are following and supporting my fellow horsemen of the podcasting apocalypse. Every Monday, Brandon Legion brings you Horrorwolf 666. Every Tuesday, I bring you a casting of hexes and a slaying of posers on Into the Necrosphere. Next week, my guest is going to be the legendary Kelly Schaefer of Atheist Until the Dirt. And then we are but one episode away from episode 200. I've hinted at who my guest will be. The identity will remain at hints until the grand day that it is unveiled. But I will say this. The episode is recorded. It's in the bank. It actually came out better than I thought it was going to be. I do believe the episode is going to be absolutely huge. And at the risk of sounding sentimental, let me say this. Episode 200 will truly be an episode for the Legion. Every Wednesday, moving on, my good friend Mike Hill of Tombs and Scorpion Throne brings you his long-running podcast, Everything Went Black. He returns every Thursday with Necromaniacs alongside his co-hosts Mike Scandado and Jeff Kashid, and that truly is one of my favorite podcasts of the week. They review old and new horror movies. It is always good value, and it's always highly entertaining. Every Sunday, the Reverend Carl Hikara brings you a journey into the dark, weird, arcane, and esoteric with his podcast Soul Knox, and then intermittently over the course of every week, when you least expect it, the brand new member of the Horsemen, my good friend Cheyenne of the band Trivax, brings you an installment of Iblis Manifestations, which is always top notch. When myself and Nars have said our goodbyes, don't go anywhere because there's plenty more to come. This week I am doing a review roundup of some of my favorite releases of the last couple of weeks, including albums by Shining, Cannibal Corpse, Hexvessel, and Mayhem. And then it is on to another installment of my increasingly infamous and increasingly notorious weekly news rant. Many of you have asked for my take on the controversy around Thy Art is Murder. I am not one to disappoint, so I'll be sharing my thoughts on that. And we are also going to be listening to some brand new music by the likes of Sulphur Aeon, Asagraum, Master's Call. We've also got on deck Bezeker Legion and more. So stick around for that. This is a beastly episode, and we start off by welcoming back to the show my good friend Naas Alcameth of Akhlys. So how's it been going, man? We've been talking on and off offline, for a while now, and I know we were meant to do this some time back. Was much of it my fuck ups with scheduling, but it's good to see you again, dude.
Yeah, you too, man. Yeah, it's been a minute, I guess.
It has been. It's crazy how quick time flies. Like I think the last time that I had you on the podcast was last year in April, and you have you've since become quite a. I mean, should we say a notorious character? Certainly, like I feel like in a weird way, the Eric Bischoff saying controversy creates cash. I mean, not to say you guys are making cash, but I definitely feel like all of the noise and all of the bullshit that Akhlys has had to put up with, I mean, it's made life, annoying, but it certainly seems to have raised your profile quite a bit over the course of the last couple of months.
Sure. Yeah, as those things tend to do, the irony of it all, So I don't know if I'm any more or less infamous than I was previously, but I don't know, maybe just more of an eyes on what we're doing. So especially now that Oculus has been playing so much, whereas in my previous bands that didn't happen very much. So
yeah, you guys have been on the road a lot. I mean, you're just about to go. If I'm not mistaken, you're about to go off again in about a week's time.
Yeah, a week from tomorrow. So we take off and going on like a 3-week run, starting in Greece and ending in Israel. So that should be
Wow.
pretty epic. Yeah.
Is that going to be your first trip to the Holy Land?
It will be. Yeah, it will. So we're all really looking forward to it. It's.
I'm very curious to hear what you think of it, because I've never been. I'm friends with MC from Melakesh, and one of the things he told me years ago, he was like, whenever he writes like a Melakesh record, he said he always goes back to Israel, which is where he's originally from, because he says, like, because of the history of the place, he says, for whatever reason, there's just such a sense of like evil and foreboding darkness in Israel. And he says it just like from as far as something that creatively inspires him, he says there's just nothing that can beat it.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, it's such just kind of an old ancient place, with obviously tons of very important history and biblical history, religious history. And so it'll be interesting to see, because, a lot of these things that we've leveraged, not so much in Oculus, but in my other bands for sure, like Bezeker Legion and Nightbringer, especially stuff with like the Watchers and those kind of things. And, Azazel being an important figure. And, we're kind of going to the area where these things had significance. So yeah, it'll be really, really interesting to see that.
What's your audience like in Israel? Like, do you have a sense of a particularly strong fan base for the band over there?
Truthfully, I have no fucking idea. So apparently it's strong. So I just seen the reactions to the festival that we're going to be playing, the Black Knight Sorceries, seems to be really a blown up. I mean, they ended up extending it to 2 days and adding more bands to it. So that'll be pretty cool. But no, I'd say we've gotten a lot of support out of Israel, actually. So
I think I might have lost you there for a sec. Oh, there we go. You're back.
Did you lose me?
Just for a second. You cut off when you said you'd had a lot of you guys have a lot of support out in Israel.
Yeah, we have seem to have a lot of support in Israel, and a lot of fans have reached out, and so that's pretty cool to see.
Where, out of interest, is the kind of strongholds for Akhlys when it comes to like fan support, like the number of people that you could reasonably have coming out to shows?
Well, I mean, our last Europe run, which wasn't that long ago, just a couple months back, almost all of our shows were sold out. So that tells you something. And so, yeah, really strong in Europe. That one was mostly like Baltic area, Eastern Europe. And we had a couple that weren't quite sold out, but for the most part, they were sold out. Some of them were smaller venues, some of them were bigger. So yeah, I think it just in general, we probably have the strongest following in Europe. So more so than in the US.
I'm always amazed, like when I look at like the where Into the Necrosphere sits as a podcast. So I get these podcast numbers every week, and it'll say like this is where it's ranked in like music podcasts. And the other day, I think it was when I had Cheyenne on, I was ranked like 13th in Finland, 26th in Sweden. You're like, Jesus Christ, 13th out of all music podcasts on iTunes in Finland. It's just it's like. People obviously clearly have fantastic taste, but it's just I don't think like it. I've never been to Finland, but you kind of get a sense that there's an awful lot of people that are into the darker shit and the sort of stuff that we're into.
Oh yeah, especially Finland for sure. And Finland's like a special place for me. I have a lot of really close friends in Finland. And I've spent a lot of time in Finland. So yeah, they definitely have a diehard scene over there for sure. And so I always enjoy getting to go over there and spend some time and catch up with old friends and such.
Did you ever have an urge to potentially look at moving out of the US, moving somewhere else?
Of course, when I was younger, that was like absolutely my goal. It was like, I want to go to Europe. I want to live in Europe. Now I think it would be incredibly difficult to do. For one, I mean, I have friends that have done it, but usually in their scenario, they like met a woman and ended up marrying her or whatever, and so that's how they were able to establish citizenship and those kind of things. So outside of like, unless I were to land a solid career opportunity abroad or something, then probably not in the cards. So yeah, I don't know, and pretty content up here in the mountains of Colorado. So and I love Europe and I love traveling over there, and but it's also really nice to come home. So
yeah. So one of the things that we spoke about way back in January was the cancellation of your tour to Australia.
yeah,
and it was interesting to me at the time you were talking, or I think I'd read it right around the time that we started exchanging messages about it. But the article that Mike Honan had posted in The Guardian.
yeah.
Just talk to me a little bit about what happened there, because I recall you saying, and you must correct me if I'm wrong here. I recall you saying he messaged you and asked for comment after the article had already been posted, or literally like a couple of hours before the article was going to be posted. Which, when I look at other influencers, that I've seen similar things happen to and hit pieces come out, that seems to be the modus operandi of The Guardian.
Yeah, actually, no, he actually never contacted us. We were never contacted whatsoever. So in the article, they said that they had reached out to the representatives, assuming that I'm the representative. It's my fucking band.
Yeah.
For commentary. I'm guessing this is probably the typical fashion in which they do business, just fucking throw some bullshit in there. They didn't bother to contact us, of course not. And so I did reach out to our label. I said, maybe they contacted them, maybe it was lost in an email. So I went through and checked that, and nope, they didn't. They don't care about our side. If anything, they had to give it a little more weight by saying that they reached out, and then it looks like we didn't respond. So, on top of that, the funniest thing that stuck out on that is, which really would be the most damning, like the smoking gun, is where they say that there was, I think it was something like a recent in-depth interview where Naas speaks about his Nazi ideals.
Yeah. Well, so the funny thing about that was, it was like, at the time, I was with my fiance. I was like, okay, so Nars has been on Cheyenne's podcast, which I listened to front to back.
Yeah.
And he's been on my podcast. So we didn't talk about, he wasn't sharing anything about any Nazi ideals on my podcast. So where on earth did this happen?
Yeah. And I mean, I've done plenty of like written interviews too, but it's funny because, if that's the, that would be the nail in the coffin, right? You got that one, put a link, put some citations, some quotes for me. There's a reason why none of that's there, that none of that's included, because this is bullshit journalism is what it is, from fucking liars. And so they just throw that in there. Of course, they preface that with allegedly, but so yeah, it is what it is, and you just got to kind of laugh at it. But and as far as infamy and black metal, I almost feel like if you don't have a level of infamy, then you're not doing black metal correctly. So
yeah. Well, that is the thing too, with the idea that black metal needs to be inclusive, and black metal needs to be this, all-encompassing circle of friendship and light. It's kind of like, well, that's sort of the antithesis to it. I mean, you read up anything about what it was like in Norway when things got started, and even beyond that, it's never meant to be, or it's not meant to be for people that have any great desire to be accepted by a large group of people. It's a very individualistic experience to listen to, and I think it's a very individualistic, or certainly the roots of it is very individualistic for both the creator and the fan.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've always said that it's for, first and foremost for me, it's a personal individual thing. And to the point that, I don't necessarily get so engaged with the scene, at large. I kind of just do my own thing, especially the older I get. But it's just kind of a funny thing because, of course, these original tenets of black metal, and then what people are trying to do with this all now, and how they're trying to, kind of reconstruct the whole thing to fit their own needs and narratives. And there's very obvious things where it's like, yeah, don't be a fucking piece of shit, but you might end up finding pieces of shit in black metal. Not fucking surprising, right? It kind of draws maniacs. But the ever growing circles of offense and the offended, it's gotten so ridiculous at this point. So now it's going to be like, in our black metal scene, we're not going to tolerate intolerance of this, and then they'll have this whole fucking laundry list that includes everything under the sun, and then it's like, it's no longer. It just takes that, kind of a lot of the heart out of the whole adversarial aspect that black metal always was.
The outrage is also incredibly selective, right? Because it's, when you look at, I've spoken about this on my news rant quite a lot. You look at some of the guys that are to this day still revered. They're never spoken of in any way, in a negative light. Ozzy Osbourne got drunk, tried to murder his wife. The guys from Motley Crue, Vince Neil did actually kill somebody. Nobody ever talks about anything those people are doing. No one says if you wear a Black Sabbath t-shirt or if you wear an Ozzy Osbourne t-shirt, you're scum, you should be fired from your job. And yet they seem to pick on bands that are smaller in profile, or maybe just aren't as iconic or as established as some of the old guard. And then they claim a moral high ground there that just doesn't seem to make sense with anything else that they actively and openly embrace.
Yeah, I almost feel like a lot of these motherfuckers are just like they're LARPing that they're part of some kind of fucking revolution, and really it's kind of laughable. And we talked about it last time, but the thing that's so hypocritical and ironic is the motherfuckers that are actually campaigning to get our show shut down, and have in some scenarios. They're Antifa and they're openly Marxist, and so they're shutting us down on the premise that we had leveraged quotations from an occultist that was also involved in Italian fascism, right? Even though we never touched on the political side, as I've said a million times, the politics don't interest us. But it's funny because these individuals are doing that. That's the premise for doing that, right? The meanwhile, their guy is Karl Marx, who is completely racist and anti-Semitic. But it's okay for them. It's okay for them. They'll go into a whole mental gymnastics and to tell you why that it flies for them, but not for us, So, they're all full of shit. You just got to laugh at them.
Well, they also never come down in any way on people that, have quoted Charles Manson or had Charles Manson samples on their, on records. And, again, Charles Manson is it's an interesting case. I've read tons and tons of books of Charles Manson. I'm extremely fascinated with, especially the late 60s, early 70s. I think it was an incredibly important time of time in the world, and it was a very fascinating time in the world. But there's no getting around the fact that Charles Manson was a white supremacist. He was certainly a misogynist, certainly anti-Semitic. That seems to raise no sort of eyebrows with them. But Julius Evola is an issue.
Yeah, it's also weird. I was kind of thinking this too, in outside of the world of the occult, which is one thing, but even like philosophy, you have certain people like Heidegger, right? Which major contributions in philosophy, but he had ties to the Third Reich, But you'll see him leveraged often on just very mainstream philosophy podcasts, And so it's interesting that in these certain areas, these people that have these connections back in the day. It feels very much like cherry picking. Like I don't quite understand why one is kind of like, they can be like, yeah, important contributions. We don't like this fucking shady part of the politics or the social stuff that he was into, but then they kind of carry on. They're like, but this part was a major contribution, or with stuff like Evola, it doesn't seem to be the case. It doesn't matter that he wrote on Buddhism and Hinduism and all these things, cross-cultural things, and that were very important works. It doesn't matter. Or I'll see stupid commentary where they're like, oh, well, even those things are tainted with his, Nazi ideals. And it's like, no, it's not. It doesn't even say anything about it in there. So,
Well, again, another example outside the world of the esoteric, Hugo Boss was also tied to the Third Reich. It's one of the most popular clothing labels around. No one's going to say, hey, you're not allowed to watch another Ryan Reynolds movie because he wore Hugo Boss on an advertisement. Or, if that guy comes into your house smelling of Hugo Boss, it's a wolf whistle to the far right.
Yeah, exactly. So, all right, now the criticism has gone into like pagan symbols, runes. The sun wheel is a big one because they like to pretend like the sun wheel itself was absolutely invented by the Third Reich, which absolutely is not true. You can find the sun wheel actually, and all the way back to terracotta vases from Greece. I think that there was I saw some other examples. I can't remember where they were exactly, but they were even older than that. So, very universal sign, right? Like you find it in India. You find it in even Native American stuff. It's like a basic symbol of the sun. You see it, what it is. But it's funny because like just all these things, and of course, a lot of people aren't using it that way. Like I'm not a fucking idiot. Like it does have this association to Nazi parties. But then, you can't throw the baby out with the fucking bathwater. We even have apparently we've got a bar here up in Denver now that doesn't allow you to wear runes. You can't have any runes on. If you do, they'll ask you to leave, I'm like, could you imagine doing that with another culture? If like you come.
Well, can you imagine doing that with
Hebrew script? We're going to kick you out.
Yeah. Well, can you imagine doing that with a hammer and sickle? That's the thing again that I find astonishing how that can be openly allowed. People can walk around with a hammer and sickle. They can walk around with Che Guevara on their T-shirt. Nothing gets said about it. Che Guevara again, absolute, to the last letter racist. He was a homophobe. He threw gay people into prison camps. I mean, he basically very openly admitted to taking inspiration from Auschwitz in creating slave labor camps in Cuba, and they had a big sign up saying, I mean, the Auschwitz, the Auschwitz words will work will set you free. They changed it in Cuba to work will make you men. But it clearly had a connection and a connotation there. But that's absolutely fine. Tom Morello can run around with that. But
Rage Against the Machine made it really popular. So now everyone
don't you dare get into anything that we don't like or that we're selectively outraged about. But one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, because I'm a complete layman to any of these things. I find it fascinating, but there's also only so much time in my day to be able to actually get my head around it. But you've touched on it a few times. You touched on it when you spoke to Cheyenne. You kind of brought it up briefly when we were talking. But you've mentioned the Kali Yuga and the Kali Yuga in the context of the time in which we live right now and what that means. I was wondering whether you could tell me a little bit more about that and just a bit more about what that, what effectively it, or how it applies to, 2023 out, the time at present.
Yeah, well, it comes from the concept of the Yuga cycles, which there's 4 of them, and it's kind of like, so if we were to phrase this up in like something that might be more familiar in a Western context, it'd be like, from the Golden Age down to what would be like Bronze or lead Age, which would be now. So it's kind of a degradation of the metals, right? And so it's kind of like this idea that there was almost kind of a more utopian type of age, and that things decline from there. Of course, it gets really difficult quickly because you're talking about mythicized language and then applying it into real world, and that can get tricky quickly. But in a nutshell, so Kali Yuga is basically the final phase, especially the twilight of the Kali Yuga, which is probably where we're at now, where you see a lot of things that were safeguarded and seen as like holy or sacred or traditions are replaced with like their opposites. And so you see a lot of like degeneracy and confusion, and to where the things that we considered just the most basic and fundamental truths are now upturned completely. Yeah. So it's something that gets leveraged quite a bit. Not only by like occult writers and political writers, but also in music. I know one of my favorite bands is Rome, and their album they released a couple of years ago, The Lone Furrow, seems to be heavily based on the concept of the Kali Yuga and the fall of the West is really what it is. So, well, on a greater scale, in that context, on a greater scale, it would be not just the West; it's kind of the fall of everything. So,
yeah, I was about to say, what is, if you were to go by, like by the idea or by the concept of the Kali Yuga, what is the eventual end for the current Yuga? Because the current Yuga, as I understand it, is the fourth Yuga.
yeah.
And so where does that end?
Well, it would restart. So there's kind of light at the end of the tunnel within the concept of the Kali Yuga. Unfortunately, for that to occur, so they're seeing these aeonic cycles as very much a living thing, right? And it has its birth and its maturity, and then its decline and inevitable death, but then a rebirth. But unfortunately, the rebirth can't occur without the death, and so that's largely up for interpretation how dramatic that will be. If it'll be in a literal apocalypse, like something biblical, some kind of style, and it feels like we're right on the edge of that anyhow, especially with our certain world conflicts and nuclear power and the division between cultures and just all this shit, disease and all this other weird shit that's going on in the world, like civil war and all those things could be on the horizon easily, so it could play out that way. I mean, it's, if you actually read the actual text around it, it gets a little, like anything, it gets a little bit hard to interpret on certain things. Well, other things are really specific in there, other things like even like pre-cooked food is mentioned, and that's pretty bizarre, especially given how old these texts were. But and then there's other odds and ends in there that it's like, they also said that people would be much shorter, and so there's some oddball stuff in there for sure. But the overall message does seem to ring true these days. So yeah.
Well, it's like, I mean, you and I both grew up in, Christian households, and, really pretty, I mean, certainly my parents were very heavily religious, and to this day, it's kind of become a running joke where when I talk to my dad, I'll text my sister, like right on cue, he's starting to talk about the end of days. It'll be like, you'll talk to him about, this and this happened. Yeah, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but blah blah blah. This is exactly what's going to happen in the end of days. But you do kind of think, things like one world government,
Yes.
a single currency. I mean, I remember all of that shit being spouted at church, when I was 6 and 7 years old, and you kind of go, I regard myself as an agnostic. I certainly don't identify as a Christian. I don't identify. I believe in spirituality, but I don't believe really in anything else. But you do look at it and you go, Jesus Christ, there's an awful lot of shit that I've been hearing about for a long time in my life that now all of a sudden seems to be coming more and more to the fore. And I'm kind of finding it harder and harder to make an argument to say, well, you guys are full of shit, and this is something completely different.
Yeah, it can get pretty dramatic quickly. I mean, I've been reading texts on these concepts since in my early 20s, and of course back then you'd see like these small, what you interpret as signs around it, but in the last like 5 to 10 years, you're like, you get to a point where you're like, holy fucking shit, this is unfolding like in a very objective manner. It's becoming very real very quickly. So that gets weird to see, and so that can obviously be a source of some anxiety for anyone, and kind of wakes you up to certain things. So, but yeah, it's interesting. But you find that this is kind of a eschatological narratives. Obviously, you're going to find these apocalyptic narratives in several religions. It's not unique to the Hindus by any means. So
yeah,
even in the Norse have Ragnarok, and the Christians have fucking Revelations, and
it definitely feels like, I mean, that time frame that you just laid out, 5 to 10 years, it definitely feels like the last 10 years has seen a very, very dramatic escalation of things deteriorating and going, getting to a point where I think a lot of things that people might have feared would happen 20 years ago, seems to now becoming a reality. What, I mean, from your observation, Because I'm curious to kind of get your take on this. I think I'd be surprised if our takes differ greatly. But what do you think caused a lot of that, and what do you think is kind of um, as spurred on a lot of the acceleration, particularly in the last 5-6 years?
I mean, there's probably multiple parts to that. I think that this kind of neo-Marxist poison has kind of infiltrated the institutions and just the minds, and especially through stuff like social media, the social media technologies, and not even just there, has moved into identity Marxism. And so it's kind of funny because these things that I see as causing a lot of these issues are they're like championed, and people are applauding it, not realizing that it's collapsing society. I think that has a lot to do with it. I think that the fucking, especially legacy news, is just fucking, again, poisonous. It's fucking bullshit. And you've got like whole groups like boomer generation, like my parents, who that's just gospel, man. You don't question the fucking news. You're fucking, someone like me is just a fucking nut job for doing that. And then when you realize that people like believe in these things, like it's fanatically so, without even realizing that it is a sort of fanaticism, then you realize how much power stuff like legacy news has. And then you got to keep tracing the stuff back from there, like who's over the legacy news. And so you can go down, and I try not to get too conspiratorial, but some of these things start becoming really obvious. And I think during COVID is when, some of these things I was kind of on the fence about anyways. And then when COVID happened, I was just kind of like, yeah, all this shit's fucking rotten.
COVID, without a shadow of a doubt, it for me lifted the veil off a lot of things. I mean, there was a lot of, I have always grown up with a degree of distrust for the government because I grew up in apartheid South Africa. So you kind of got taught to have a degree of distrust for the government. Certainly, if your parents were opposed to the ruling government, as my parents were, but like I think I told you this the last time. My first real loss of trust in institutions generally, but certainly in the media, came during the Iraq War, when the Iraq War was proven to be fraudulent and just precipitated on a complete lie, total garbage. That's when I started to really question every single thing that I saw. But I'm going to say something that I've said on the last 2 episodes, so folks are going to have to indulge me if I sound like I'm repeating myself. But I was going to propose this theory of mine to you around why I think things have gotten worse, and unfortunately, if you consider it through this lens, I don't necessarily see it getting any better. But I think 2 of the things that are, or 2 of the driving forces that are making society infinitely worse and are degrading society, certainly Western civilization, at a rapidly increasing rate. I think, first of all, there's a generation of people that have been in the West conditioned to respond to, interpret, and to analyze every single situation, everything that befalls them, every bit of information that they absorb, with emotions first. Emotions lead everything. And so when emotions lead everything, then everything is based around, how does this make me feel at the time? Do I feel sad or do I feel good about this? Does this make me feel happy? Does this make me feel miserable? And, some of the politicians have even given this away. So AOC said, very famously, just because it's true doesn't mean it's right. And she if you think about that statement, whether that was off the cuff or whether that was intended, she gave the game away a little bit. Concurrently, the other force that is at work is the fact that people have also been conditioned, I would say certainly from Gen X, but definitely from millennials on down, to think about everything in terms of a binary. So something is either extremely good or extremely bad, extremely evil, extremely virtuous. You either a friend or you're the greatest of enemies. And I feel like, unfortunately, when you operate on that sort of extreme of a binary, there's very little room for folks on either side of the binary to see any kind of middle ground. And the worry is, if you can't see any middle ground because because it's emotions first with everything, and if you were to have a conversation with somebody about something that you wildly disagree about, and you throw anything at them that immediately gives them that sort of that instinctively negative emotional, or garners that instinctively negative emotional response, I don't know how you fix this. I mean, it's like if this were if this were a relationship, if the West were a marriage, you would say, look, as your marriage counselor, I think you're wasting your money coming for therapy sessions once a week, because I don't think you guys are going to, see eye to eye ever again.
No, I totally agree. That's very much, I think, especially on the emotion over logic is what it is. Emotion over logic. And that's why, and you even see like this stuff with like these college professors who are like disparaging stuff. Like, I think logic actually was one of them. That logic was, I can't remember if they said it was a white supremacist thing or a male thing, like however it was kind of painted up in this regard. This is why we got to throw out logic. Yeah, so we got to throw out logic right now, and it's crazy. And like just what you said about just because it's true doesn't mean it's. I can't remember what the phrase was exactly. If it's good, and so that's a scary thought, right? Like so, and I feel like that's just kind of the age we're moving into, where subjectivity is being treated as the new objectivity. So subjectivity is like what we're gonna base our rules on, how people fucking feel, but only certain people. So that gets a little strange. And I think it leads you into very damaging consequences when you let emotion rule, and when you start, kind of reconstructing your society based on people's feelings.
And based on the feelings of a subset of people, because as you say, it's not everybody. Some folks, by threat of, going to prison, don't have the right to offend. But other people, no matter how offensive, because there's an awful lot of things about a lot of the folks or a lot of the groups that are, protected in society right now that I find offensive. I think if you're a parent, you can't help but be offended by quite a lot of it. But I wouldn't be, there was a guy, as a matter of fact, actually in West Virginia, I think it was West Virginia, was arrested for daring to say that, his daughter had been raped by somebody at school. The person who was a boy dressed up as a girl, his daughter had been raped in the girls' bathrooms. And when he mentioned it and said the school had covered it up, he was arrested. And it was only when Glenn Youngkin intervened and pardoned him. But I mean, otherwise that guy might have landed up in prison. And then you see on the other side statistics suggesting now that if you're in a place like Chicago, for example, and you commit a major crime, you've got a 5% chance of getting arrested. So you can steal, rob, you can rape, you can do whatever you want, 5% chance of getting arrested. But don't dare say that, hey, listen, it's wrong for a school to cover up the fact that my daughter was raped.
Yeah, it's absolutely insane. There's probably people that are going to watch this right now and just be like, "These fucking bigots!" I can't believe they even said that.
I was about to say, how dare they not want little girls to be raped in the bathrooms at school? Terrible.
Yeah, well, they'll be like, "What did that shitty little girl do to deserve that? Did she, not use the pronouns or something?" It's fucking bullshit, and it's funny because I was reading this thing on these studies on equality. Actually, this was I think I was telling you about him. It's James Lindsay who did this, and in the 80s it was really well approached, because it was like, so these equality studies, they take like people with different backgrounds and different kind of philosophies, and of course from different racial groups and all those things, and kind of put them together. And they saw that it had these really good results. Like, so you could have like, different political ideas. And so that was like the diversity, right? And now what it is it's like, it has to be a very specific kind of diversity. And what that is there is a homogenous social and political thought that they all share. Anybody else that doesn't share that, then they're the wrong kind of diversity. So cast them out. So it's funny. Yeah. It's just, again, duplicit, and this is what they're basing all this off of. So,
well, this is also where you can't help but become a little bit conspiratorial, because I think I do think it's not a binary. I don't think there's I do think there are elites. It's a matter of record that there are elites that meet in Davos once a year that are planning things for society. That again, you can talk about the World Economic Forum, about Klaus and everybody. James Lindsay talks about them quite a lot as well. But I don't think that they necessarily have orchestrated every single thing. What I do think they are incredible opportunists, because what they'll do is they'll see things like critical gender theory, or they'll see things like, quote unquote, climate change denial as an opportunity to go, we can let a lot of this stuff amplify on social media. Then we can step in and we can speak to that emotional angle that we just mentioned before, and we can say we're going to stop misinformation, or we're going to stop hate speech because it's bad, and the people that do it are bad, blah blah blah. And so they come under these auspices of actually doing something good, but really what they're doing is they're controlling or compelling speech. And if anybody knows anything about horses, and it'll sound like I've jumped to a very random analogy, but if you've ever trained a horse, right? You know that if in order to get the horse to bend to your whims, you need to get to control the horse's feet. As soon as you control the horse's feet, you control the horse. That's what natural horsemanship teaches you. And what I was watching somebody demonstrate that a couple of months ago, and I sat thinking to myself, human beings are kind of the same, but the way we are is, as soon as you can command our tongues, you can start commanding the human being. Because if you create a society where people are too afraid to speak out about subject A or subject B, then pretty soon they're going to start self-censoring themselves automatically on subject C, subject D, because those are adjacent to subject A and B. And my God, I already don't want to catch any grief about subject or sharing my views on subject A and B, so I may as well shut the fuck up about subjects C and D. You understand what I mean? And I think a lot of what's going on right now is, I think there is a compelling of speech, whether directly through, some of these laws that they're trying to pass. I mean, there's a law that they're now trying to pass in the UK where they're going to make it illegal for you to even say that you disagree with the government's position on climate change, which is which is absolutely insane. So it's it's nuts, but that's not the thing about it. Is that I find mind-boggling why more people don't see it. I mean, that's not freedom. It's not freedom to be able to live in a country where you're not allowed to say what you want to say.
Well, these people these people that champion the citizens at the citizen level that are applauding that, because they say that they're like, yeah, these people that do say those things are, fuck them and they're crazy. They don't realize it's coming for them eventually. It's coming for, this is not where it stops, And so it's scary to see, and it's like, people say crazy and stupid shit all the fucking time. And it's like, the shit that I absolutely don't agree with, I still think that they should have the right to say it. They should still have a open forum to say these things. That if it's fucking stupid, then shout it to the fucking heavens, and then the masses can tell you how fucking stupid it is. But yeah, once you start compelling speech and restricting speech, that's very tyrannical, of course.
And as I said, I think the intent is to start to control the human being, and these folks that you talk about who are jumping in and are amplifying this, whether they're on TikTok, whether they're acting like the moral police, or whether they're somebody like Mike Honan or somebody like that, if they were to study the real history of their heroes and idols, and they look at what happened after the Great Leap Forward, what happened after the Russian Revolution, the useful idiots got killed. Most of them got lined up and shot because by the People's Liberation Army.
Yeah, so these people don't understand it. They're just the new red shirt.
Once these people were in power, they're like, well, we've got no more use for you, so it's it's final notice time.
Look at China, and they took that same approach, especially through some of the identity stuff. And it's like, do you see a lot of diversity in those identity politics in China? Does that exist? Fuck no. It already had its use, and they're done with that.
Yeah. No, it's to me, I can understand society falling for some of the stuff because I don't have much faith in society in any case. But what I hoped what actually, frankly, what I never thought I would see until a few years ago was to see the metal scene and a scene that I had kind of grown up with, this naive idea that we're for freedom of speech and we're against we naturally mistrust the government, etc., etc. So many people just going along with a party line. I mean, and the thing that blows my mind is it's not that they just go along with a party line, whether they're based in the US or whether they're based in Europe. They're effectively just repeating talking points straight off Karen Jean-Pierre's talk sheet. They are repeating the talking points of the Democrat Party.
Yeah, it's funny because this is supposed to be like especially like our countercultures, right? Our youth countercultures or whatever, like stuff in the back in the day that was like anti-government and all these things. It's like it's gone like this weird direction to where they're stepping in line with governments and with corporations, and they're screaming it too. And like that's the punk rock now. I think actually John Lydon, somewhat recently, maybe a year or two ago, came out and kind of spoke out about like how disgusted he was with basically like the neoliberals because of that, and he was like, what fucking happened? Here you got Johnny Rotten telling you, like what the fuck happened.
Yeah, you've got also people that are again that have always positioned themselves as being against big corporates and against capitalism, and it's like you are literally openly shilling for the pharmaceutical industry. Like that to me was that was the greatest goof of all time, and we're talking about people that I genuinely used to respect. I mean, like Henry Rollins is a great example. I love Black Flag. I like Rollins' band to the point where I'm actually one of the few people I know who I'm actually still on board with Come In and Burn. I always used to go to the guy's spoken word shows and stuff like that, and then the last couple of years you start to look at some of the things that he says and you go, like, what happened here? Like, you used to be somebody who I used to think was, a smart, clued up, at the very least balanced guy. You weren't Thomas Sowell, you weren't, Victor Davis Hanson, but you could carry yourself in conversation. I mean, I'm not those people either, but I could imagine him. I used to be able to imagine somebody like that being someone I can sit down and have a conversation with. But again, recently I saw him talk about it's wonderful to see in America that we're starting to make recompense for the sins of the past. It's just shocking that we live in a country where women weren't allowed to vote 100 years ago, and you look at it and you go, well, the right or wrong of it is not a question here. The fact is, the entire world was like that. It's
exactly.
Like so many of the sins of the past. It's like you seem to think that unless a country began from its inception day as your progressive socialist utopia, everything that was done there was evil and wrong, and you should not be you shouldn't be proud of where you're from, shouldn't be proud of your heritage, because it was bad, and you're very bad for thinking it wasn't bad.
Yeah, and again, this is only applied to certain people. When the whole history of the world, especially you look at, we talked about this before, but like something like slavery, it's like point to me one civilization that didn't participate in slavery. These things are bad, obviously, but it's funny because it just gets applied to one group of people, and then that they're and then when they talk about like stuff like reparations or something, I'm like, there was a whole war fought over this.
Yeah,
there was a whole war fought over to end slavery. How many died to end slavery? And that wasn't enough. Like, it just gets bullshit. And I think that a lot of these things are stoked just to kind of foment like further divisions. Like I almost feel like media stirs these things up a lot of times just because they know like that it's gonna stir shit up.
Do you know Victor Davis Hanson at all?
No, I don't. I'm not aware of that.
Very interesting guy. I'll send you some of his stuff because I think you'll quite like it. But he made an extremely good point about the division in society, and essentially, like, his theory is that it begins with the erosion of the middle class, because the middle class tends to vote in its own self-interest a lot more than the extremely impoverished or the super rich elites. And he says what happens when the government implements policies that erode the middle class, as we've seen happen across the US, definitely across the UK, you have these, this growing divide between rich and poor. And so what that then leads to is the populists coming and saying, and they always have a boogeyman to be able to say, hey, those people are the ones that are responsible for, the misery that you're experiencing in your life. And that's how they whip people up. But that's how societal division is stoked, in that the groups of people, because of that divide, have less and less and less in common with each other, and they begin to see each other increasingly as the enemy. And in some cases you could argue rightfully so, but where it stems from is from government incompetence, and you could maybe also argue it's by design, because something like COVID, it's a matter of record. COVID was a mass transfer of wealth from the middle class to the super rich. I mean, I can't remember the exact amount of money, but it's a staggering number. It's like $26 trillion or something worth of wealth was transferred to the elites. You can certainly imagine when
that's just coincidence.
Of course, yeah. when the Pentagon turns around and says we can't account for, I think, what did they say, 100 billion or something like that?
I'm like, did you look under the couch?
Yeah. So I mean that as well. I can't believe that more people aren't outraged by something like that anymore. It's like there's certain things that have become so drowned out by all of the other garbage and all of the other little petty bickerings and stuff like that no one looks at that anymore and goes, Jesus Christ, had this happened in 1983, there would be mass outrage for months on end. People would be, there would be certainly tens of people arrested for this. And it would be a scandal that they would write books over. Now it's just, there's 100 billion missing. We don't know what happened.
Yeah. So, our focus is elsewhere, I guess, on whatever they're going to deem an oppressed minorities being offended is where the outrage is going to come, not by stuff like this. Stuff like this just goes, no one cares. They can put it right on the front headlines, and it's like, that's, it's really interesting and now I'm kind of totally getting off track here, but just as an example, I thought it was kind of a funny thing. Like, if you remember 1 or 2 years ago, the whole UFO thing blew up, right? And the government's coming out and they're like, yeah, we do have a program and we've got this actual footage and they were actually playing this footage, and, no one fucking cares. And no one cared, And I was like, it's so bizarre, at this point. And sometimes you wonder if it was just some weird psyop just to throw out there to see if people actually gave a fuck, They don't care. People don't care.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing. They're so distracted by so many other things. The government, really just can pretty much say anything they want. You learn if you study PR or you study, it's pretty common sense in any case. But one of the first rules of PR is if you've got bad news to share, try and slide it in on the back pages when another news story is broken. You see that kind of subterfuge happening in the media all the time. There'll be some sort of crazy bullshit going. Well, we saw it with Trump and Hunter Biden. Trump gets indicted literally a day later. Oh, by the way, we've got more evidence suggesting, Hunter Biden is in cahoots with XYZ bad actor, and money's being passed around. And his dad was in the room while he was having conversations with these people, so his dad almost certainly lied when he was on the campaign trail. People don't give a fuck. They just look at it and
they don't give a fuck. And meantime, and then on the opposite end, all the Republicans are just apparently being arrested. So
yeah,
it's an interesting thing to see. I'm like, okay,
so you can throw your political. I mean, I spoke to Evan Hopper about this too. It's like you can throw no sane thinking human being can look at the idea that you're throwing your political opponents in jail as being this is brilliant. It's good that it's happening. That is the path to banana republic status.
Absolutely. I'm like, that's a scary thing. I mean, I'd feel the same way too. On either side, if people just 100%. Start getting thrown into fucking, jail or prison, just being.
I mean, if I took over, people would be thrown in prison. Side. But obviously, there won't be any more elections again once I take power. So.
Yeah.
They'll call the election that they had the final election. So. Anyways, let's talk a bit about music, man. So
let's do it. Fuck politics. Let's talk music.
I happened to hear from our good mutual friend Carl. He was in the rehearsal room when you guys were jamming on some new music. or a follow-up to Melinoe. Cool. What's going on?
Yeah, so I've been working on the new album for fucking, it feels like goddamn eternity now, but I think about a year and a half now since I started writing the initial song that was going to be on the next Oculus album. But we're getting there. We've gotten to the point where we're actually like rehearsing new music in the practice space, so that's exciting. And it's kind of a nice break of repetition, because we've been playing the same fucking songs for years and years, over and over and over ad nauseum. So it's great to finally be doing some new stuff. But yeah, it's been tough, man. It's been tough, and it's funny. It's just like, maybe I'm just getting fucking old. I don't know, but like the more I do this, the tougher it gets. It takes more and more time. But like, right now I'm working on the 4th proper black metal song that will be on the album, and I spent a year and a half doing this. I mean, granted, our songs are incredibly long and incredibly involved, so there's a lot going on in that song, in these songs. But yeah, it's been taking up my time, and so it's all coming together. Like, got some exciting artists on board, and the whole theme has kind of been coming together really beautifully. And and it looks like we are probably set for, at this point, we're looking at either December or January, entering back into Flatline Studios, and then we'll finalize the whole thing.
Why does it feel like it's harder as you grow older to write music? And I mean, again, I completely get it, because as you say, you are getting older. Mm-hmm. But I'm always curious about this, because it's kind of it's something I've probably been one of the most fascinating parts of those podcasting journeys. Speaking to some folks that have been around doing this for ages and somehow can just keep on cranking out, great record after great record. But then you look at it and you go, there's so few people that can actually do that.
Very few. And I've been very aware of this for a while, and there's kind of like this interesting term called kyros, which is like, and I'm probably pronouncing it wrong, so my Greek friends are going to talk shit to me immediately when I get to Greece, but it means roughly kind of youth, but it's more like, speaks to like a vitality, and it was kind of seen as like, this is, that vitality of youth was, can be the source of inspiration, and that eventually that starts to fade. Like, so there's some of that too. And like, this is more like my own like paranoia, like, is my kyros, fading, because the inspiration doesn't strike quite as often. And so the way I approach that is like, of course you can kind of do things to like cultivate that inspiration through like reading or listening to other things, or, whatever that is. But the one thing I try not to do, which I think is a mistake with some people, is whether or not inspiration strikes, they just do it anyways. They're like, I'm just going to write the book anyways, or I'm just going to make this album. And we see it all the time. You even see bands where you're like, you could tell it wasn't clicking on that one album.
Yeah.
Maybe they came back around after, or, and so, you don't want to, at the same time, you don't want to wait around and hope that inspiration strikes. You do need to try and do things to cultivate that. And so that's kind of my approach to it, but it does just take a lot more time. It takes a lot more time. There's also like, part of it is, of course, when you're younger, in a lot of people's scenarios, they don't have as much going on, enough, as many responsibilities, And so when you have an abundance of free time, you can leverage that. The interesting thing, which I spoke about before with like Melinoe, is we were in fucking COVID lockdown. So all of a sudden it was like, not only was I inspired because of the weirdness of the world, which spawned dreams, which is kind of like, at the core of the project. But, I had all this time on my hands, so that was helpful. That was very fortuitous. So now I kind of had to sit back, because I was really stressing about it for a while. I think I dove into the first song that I wrote, and for some reason it was like lightning fucking struck. And I'm almost feeling like that might just be the big boy of the album right out the gates. After not writing for some time. It just happened that way, right? I just got obsessed, and I wrote this very lengthy, very complex song that is still just now, when I go back into my project file and revisit it, and even like, you know, Yogan, our drummer, we're just like, holy fuck, like this song is fucking amazing. But then it was interesting because it was like directly after that, I just stumbled, man. I was just stumbling. And I was like, fuck. And then, of course, I just raised the bar so fucking high with song 1 that I was like, you gotta write the rest of the fucking album, motherfucker. And it's got to be on par with this, which is great. That's a great thing. But it's, you know, it's taken, you know, a year and a half to do, and I'm still doing it. I'm still not quite there yet. But we're getting there. And it's just funny because you know, of course, the stress and anxiety around this on all these things that I just said also works as the catalyst. You know, it also is kind of the Nigredo, and again, being between the fucking hammer and the forge. And next thing you know, it's like, you know, you've, you know, put yourself through hell and back artistically, and you're coming out on the other side with some fucking diamonds, you know?
Yeah.
So it's coming together. It's coming together. We finally just got the art for it, and it's going to be fucking absolutely brilliant. The concept's brilliant. My good friend, Richard Gavin, who is a horror writer and occult writer, is going to be contributing. And so it just, all these things are kind of falling into place now. So yeah, I think it's going to be, you know, monumental for us, truthfully.
Is there a degree of pressure as well, or at least was there a degree of pressure as well to follow up to a record like Melinoe? Because I mean, that album is kind of matured, in my view, like fine wine. I mean, you know, anytime I talk to certainly anybody in my circles, you bring that record up, there is kind of this hushed silence that you know, you're greeted with. It really is I think it's one of the great landmark black metal records of the last decade, without a shadow of a doubt. And I mean, I'm not just saying that because, you know, we're friends or because I'm talking to you, but it genuinely is. It is a landmark record, and it's one that has kind of gotten better and better the longer people have had to live with it. And I'm sure you've got at least a sense of awareness of that as well, right? Does that play in the back of your mind as you work on this new material?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that was probably the mind fuck from the very first step. You know, even when I did Melinoe, like even as I was still writing it, especially when I was getting closer to the end during that whole COVID weirdness, I was just like, it was almost like I was watching from the outside or something, you know. Just seeing some of these songs come together, I was just like, holy fuck. Like, you know, it was so uncanny to me that I couldn't even quite understand how it was all coming together exactly. And then once it was released, of course, I'm just like, you know, and I'll go back and, you know, of course, at least for me, when I release a new album, I'll be, you know, obviously very excited about it, and I'll fucking listen to it until I fucking damn near hate the fucking thing and can't listen to it anymore, right? You wear it out, you wear your ear out, but then I'll come back to it later, and like, you know, and even when I do, then I'm just like, Jesus fucking Christ, like, and then it's hard to like articulate or quite put yourself back into that space, and it almost feels like it wasn't you, or, you know, almost like I am an outsider as well to it. And I think when you start feeling that way, because I don't feel that way about every album I do, when you start feeling that way, that's when you probably know that you fucking hit the bullseye, right? But yeah, going into a new one, it's like, fuck, man, you know, you raise that bar pretty fucking high, so it's like, what are you gonna do? And then I think that the mistake then that maybe some bands go into is they try and make like 2.0. Like, I'm not trying to make Melinoe 2.0, you know? And then you have the other end of that, where a band releases a fucking just brilliant album, and they go, you know, we're going to try something really different this time. And then it might as well be a different fucking band. And you're like, they flop, or it's, you know, that's when the black metal band decides not to be black metal anymore and be more progressive or whatever the fuck it is. Not doing that, not interested in doing that. I don't think that'll never be an issue or ever be an issue for me. But just realizing that Melinoe was brilliant because at some point it took a life of its own. And so in order for the next album to be true to Oculus, I have to let it take its life of its own. I feel that that's what it's been doing. It'll definitely be under the aegis of Oculus, but it will have its, own specific spirit to it, which we're already seeing that manifest, which is kind of exciting. Like, it's almost like an alchemical process. Like you're starting to see the definition around it, and so it's an interesting thing to go through. So, but yeah. In a nutshell, that was incredibly daunting.
Is Melinoe the record out of everything that you've made? Whether it's Terra Damnata or whether it's even Supplication. Is Melinoe the record that you're closest to, or that you feel the closest to?
Yeah, especially these days in my older age, like, for sure. I think it's the one I'm probably the proudest of. And I would say that it used to be, and I mean, it still is, like, it's still one of the ones that I feel very close to and the most proud of. Before that was Ego Dominus Tuus, Nightbringer. And that one for me, that was just really resonated with me, and I felt like everything came together exactly how I wished it would, and that album, even to this day, like, reflects what I see as the spirit of Nightbringer. Really shone through on that one. So, which is interesting because it wasn't. We put out another album after that, which I love. I'm proud of that one too. But there's these certain ones in like the catalog of stuff I've done. Like, another one would be Bestia Arcana Holocaust on. When I go back and revisit that, I'm just like, fuck, nailed that. Something, another time and place thing was going on.
In your ripe old age of you're 43 now, right? So you're the same age as me.
Yeah, 43.
Yeah. So in your ripe old age of 43, would you ever consider doing anything else outside of Oculus, almost as kind of a creative palate cleanser, if you will, or just something to keep Oculus fresh as a prospect?
You mean it's do another band as far as like a musical endeavor?
Well, so I'll give you a good example. My friend Matt, I'm sure you would have heard it, because if you ever listen to the podcast, I talk about it a lot. But Werewolves was something that they just did as kind of a side project. They had a whole bunch of other stuff that they do.
Yeah,
but
which is
Werewolves was kind
killer.
of just it's fucking awesome. But it was just a way for them to kind of just do something different, and for him it was a means to just write in a way that he wasn't used to writing in before. So very, very spontaneous. No millions of rewrites, retakes, fixating on the same part of the song for hours on end. They literally write albums in like the space of a day or two. But I think it in a weird way, what I've noticed about him is it definitely seems to have been it certainly seems to have sparked a lot of creativity from him, because recently, I mean, he's just been cranking out one thing after the other. That last Antichrist Imperium record was incredible. He's done, probably another Werewolves album in the time that we've done this interview. So it's like, he's I almost feel like when you get to a certain age, or you get to a certain level of experience, maybe it is actually a good thing to do some different stuff, just to almost in a way help you kind of step away from your main musical concern and then go back into it with fresh eyes or fresh ears.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, possibly, maybe if like a certain collaboration came up that I was interested in, or something like that. But I've usually kind of kept myself busy with just having so many fucking bands, So, which I've kind of stepped back from that in more recent years. But it's like we're going to be doing a new Bestia Arcana album, and so
I was just about to say, are any of the kind of main vehicles like Aeratos, Bestia Arcana, Nightbringer, are they still going on?
Yeah. So we are going to do another Nightbringer album too. So there's going to be at least one more, which is just going to be studio, And Nightbringer's a little bit different because where I'm the fucking tyrant of all my other bands because I just control everything. Nightbringer is not. Nightbringer is a collective. But been talking quite a bit with VJS, our other member, who's also in Adustio and Sargeist and probably several other bands that I'm not aware of. But we've been chatting about it, and we've got it lined up here in the queue to do at least one more Nightbringer album. Yeah, so and I actually, in the songs, I've had them written for years. I've just been sitting on them. So we'll do that. That will be through Season of Mist again, and they'll probably be pissed if they actually listen to this, because I probably wasn't supposed to just say that. But anyhow, fucking. And then we're doing, and then we're gonna do a new Best Arcana, which Best Arcana is nice for me because it's kind of like, it kind of rides that line between death metal and black metal, and we're probably gonna push that line a little bit and get into a lot of heavier stuff. And for some reason, that stuff's easier for me to write. Just it takes less thought, and I don't know. I just intuitively kind of gravitate that way. And so it's going to be, I think that one's going to be really enjoyable, and kind of like, it's a different mind state when I'm doing Best Arcana. It's more just getting into like just the shredding of guitar, and just these things that I can enjoy. And so I think that will kind of do that for me, get me out of the mindset I'll be coming out of finishing the new Oculus, and kind of.
Well, that was actually also something I was driving at. Like, Oculus is such an intense musical endeavor. Like, if you listen to Effie Altus or any other a song like that, I mean, that is it's far and away some of the most intense black metal that I think has potentially ever been created. But it's like, it's just there is an emotional intensity around that I would imagine, creatively at least, must be pretty draining when you're making music like that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that just like everything that informs it can become draining. My own weird psychological processes around it gets draining. You go on this roller coaster between elation and self-doubt, through something like that. And so it is completely taxing. And by the end of it, like, I remember at the end of Melinoe, I was just totally fucking exhausted, which was really interesting, because it's funny that you brought up Epheltes, because I had an entirely different song written that didn't make it onto the album. And I was so exhausted at that point that I was like basically convincing myself, even though I knew in my heart of hearts the song didn't belong on the album, it didn't fit with the rest. It was a good black metal song, but the magic wasn't there. But I was just gonna fucking do it. I was just like, fuck it, because this need one more song, and I'm just fucking done. I'm just exhausted. And then one night I was just noodling around, stuck in my fucking house, as we all were during COVID, and I came up with the opening riff for Epheltes, and I'm just like plucking my guitar, not even plugged in, and I was like, oh, that's very haunting sounding. And next thing you know, I hop up with my guitar, I sit at my studio station and bring up in Cubase and start recording it. And then I think I stayed up to like 4 or 5 in the morning, and I had like the first like 3 or 4 verses of that song done. And then from there I do an export, put it on my phone. And, I was living out in a area near the woods then, not where I live now. I live in the mountains now, but I mean, the sun's fucking coming up, and I got to go listen to this. I got to jam it in my car and step away from the computer screen. And, and so so all of a sudden I went from totally exhausted, I'm done with this album. And it would have been a different album if this hadn't happened that night. And all of a sudden that flame is just like reignited, with gusto. And I was like, this fucking song is fucking evil. And that's how that happened. So it's funny how these things can occur, So I'm sitting there kind of almost melancholically going, the album's almost there. You're going to have one bullshit song, but of course you try and convince yourself, it's not that bad. It's just how you feel now. And, and then from sitting there noodling around with my guitar in that mindset, then this last little piece came into place.
It is definitely, like, to me, it's the freezing moon of the album, right? It's like the whenever I think of Melinoe, I immediately think of that opening riff to that song. It's incredible. It's funny, and it's crazy that you mentioned how it kind of potentially wasn't even going to be on the album to begin with.
Yeah. And it's funny because I went back and revisited the song that was going to be in its place, and I'm like, this song fucking kills. It's just not Oculus. It's just not Oculus, you know. And I'm almost like, what am I going to use this for? Maybe I'll use it for Nightbringer or something at some point, but maybe it just needs to just remain private to me. And I go, damn, I wish I had a place to put that song because it's really good.
Yeah. So I want to make an observation now because you've kind of touched on it, but we as I said at the beginning of the conversation, we spoke first in April. You seem to have mellowed out as a man an awful lot in the last 18 months, and I don't mean that as a bad thing. I mean, I think I've potentially also probably become less intense about certain things. I mean, I don't know whether it's because I'm kind of trying to even out my own personal algorithm a little bit more than it was before. I'm trying not to get as worked up about certain things. But yeah, you definitely seem to be you seem to be more at peace, more content with the world, or at the very least with your own situation, your own surroundings than I recall you being when we first met.
Yeah, I would say that's very true. I mean, I went, especially in my 20s. Well, shit, my 20s was absolute fucking chaos and mayhem. You know, going into this shit with the absolute furor. And you feel the repercussions of that shit sometimes, which probably started to manifest in my 30s and then now into my 40s. You know, you really want to find balance and some measure of tranquility, you know, which I do think that I found, especially being up in the mountains and with, kiddos and family and all that. Those things do balance you. And I don't know. Like there are certain things that still fucking absolutely fucking enrage me, but you also have to get to this point that you have to decide on, which hill are you going to fucking die on? And so, taking this approach and just, I think also just, just generally dubbed spirituality, where I've come with that, I put a lot of time into my studies and that kind of focus. And, a lot of things have changed on that front over the years too. And, I think it's kind of brought me to this place that I am now. And no, I absolutely would agree. Like I have kind of come to a place that's like maybe a bit more sanctuary for myself.
When you say you live up in the mountains, do you live quite secluded?
Yeah, I'm pretty far up. Most people aren't going to know the geography of Colorado, but I live kind of almost on the backside of Pikes Peak, which is one of our major mountains over Colorado Springs. So I'm pretty far up into the actual mountains. Like, it's about an hour and a half drive up into the mountains to the house. And so, yeah, we're pretty far up here. So,
and you have many neighbors around you?
Yeah, we've got neighbors, but the neighbors so everyone has acreage, right? So
yeah.
We've got 2 acres, and then beyond that, most of our neighbors seem to have quite a bit more acreage. So if you wave to them, they probably wouldn't realize you were waving.
Yeah, which is ideal. So. Well, I mean, I'm in the same boat. It's great. I moved out of London in 2020, and we're going to live here probably forever. I mean, it's fucking awesome. We have one set of neighbors. They can't see us because there's like a pretty significant tree wall between the two of us. Besides that, nothing. I can go stand up on.
So are you in like a forest? Is it like a forest
area? So we're in. There is actually a forested area quite near us, but we're really in very quintessential English countryside. So there's not a lot around us. There's just valleys and farmland, rolling hills, valleys, farmland. We've got our horses here. The number of cats we have has now gone up to 10 because my fiance is anything with any animal that needs saving will potentially end up at our house. and we've got 3 dogs.
I would absolutely die of anaphylaxis there.
Oh, really?
I'm incredibly allergic to basically.
Oh, really?
Fucking but especially cats. Like I'm like
Yeah.
literally deathly allergic. The first time I went to Europe, I ended up being hospitalized long enough that I
Holy
missed my flight
shit.
home. So, and from exposure to cats. So now I've
Oh,
just
bro,
thrown that out
I was
there
gonna
for
invite you for
all
a
my
barbecue,
enemies.
but it's like, but it is awesome living outside of the city, though. It's crazy the degree to which it lowers your stress levels, and actually like how much of a shock to the system it is when you actually go back to the city. Because when I go back to London now, even when I go back to Kingston where I used to live, which is pretty chilled out, I don't mind being there for like a day, but I don't want to be there for any longer.
That I'm the same way. I've had to live in the city a couple times. I used to work in Denver years ago, and even when I worked in Denver, I decided to live in Monument, which was the previous place I lived, which is basically a small town that's not in the woods, but right at the cusp of the woods. And so like you had everything right there. So it was cool. But I did live in Denver twice and I fucking hated it. Like I moved out of Denver, ended up having to go back just for the convenience and of it. But then hated it again. I was like, I can't live in an urban setting. I just can't. And historically, I mean, even when I was younger, I've lived in several cabins now, and some were even more remote than where I am now, and that's just where I feel at peace. Is I got to be up in the mountains of Colorado, and the further away I can get away with getting, then I'm going to do that. The further away I can get from a city or from fucking people, that's what I want to do.
And you remind me of myself a little bit, because I don't think either of us are introverted. I'm not an introvert in any way, but I'm not an extrovert that, when they show you those bullshit charts of like an extrovert gets energy from conversations with other people. I get energy from conversations with people who I like, but I just don't happen to like a lot of people. So it's like that's the problem.
Yeah, I feel like the extroverts or the introvert is more like forced upon me by just not liking fucking people.
Yeah.
Or if there's a lot of people I don't necessarily dislike, but I'm ambivalent, extremely ambivalent towards it. Like I don't give a fuck. Like I have to put on the song and dance and play the whole fucking shit at work 5 days a week. I don't have the energy to do it beyond that.
Yeah.
So
no,
unless you're an interesting person to me that's like-minded and is gonna be engaging to a certain intellectual level, I'm not gonna fucking give a fuck. Doesn't mean I'm gonna be a dick, but I'm just gonna be disinterested.
Yeah, no, I'm exactly the same way, and I have to have a period of time at night where I can do something completely and utterly mindless just to unwind from everything. Because I have an extremely high stress job, loads of having to speak to people. A lot of the people I speak to are perfectly pleasant and fine, but again, it's like there's people that are part of your circle, and there's people that aren't, and my circle is pretty limited. So, but here's a question for you. So when you do have like that spare moment to unwind, like what do you actually do to what would a guy, and I kind of say this more thinking about the intense dude that I first met, but like, what do you do to entertain yourself? What do you do to relax?
I will answer that here shortly, but I'm going to take my first bathroom break here.
I'm about to say, it's going to be one of the first things you're going to do to relax.
Yeah. Speaking of, this is what I do to relax.
All right, I'm going to get myself another wine. I'll be back now.
All right. Okay, I am back.
You're not on the rum and cokes today.
No, I'm not on the rum and cokes. Yeah, instead I'm drinking Guinness.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, I'm trying to limit that to at least a degree, especially right before tour where it's not going to be limited at all. So
no,
3 weeks is a long time. So
yeah, especially a long time, and a lot of your liver taking a battering, your liver and your kidneys taking a battering.
Yes, and that.
Yeah, so we were saying, time to yourself. What do you spend your time doing?
It really depends. I mean, I like to read. Of course, not just like, whatever cult material, but I'm big into like horror fiction. And so Carl, actually, me and him go back and forth on recommendations and stuff like that. So I like to do that. I also really like fucking cinema, but it has to be good cinema, which is a trick these days, right? Because everything fucking sucks. Everything's just such garbage now. But trying to, again, like going off friends' recommendations and chasing things down, and I'm a lover of good cinema, and so when I'm just doing anything kind of like more mindless, I'll usually do something like that, or sometimes I just go on drives. It's like I live in such a beautiful area, like I'll just hop in my car, and especially if it's like kind of like a melancholic day with like, gray overcast skies. And that's when it starts calling to me. And I'm like, I'm going to hop in my car and go drive up the mountain even more, or go drive over to certain areas I like. There's this place called the Crags and Devil's Playground, which has got a cool name. That's a really thick forested area. That's pretty fucking awesome. And so, this is like my backyard. So I'll just go drive around and do stuff like that.
And cinema wise, what? So if we were to go back and like have you pick out a couple of things that you are particularly fond of, what comes to mind?
Well, my favorites, some of them are the less obscure favorites is the original Geiger, or the original Alien. The 1979 Alien, I think, is absolutely genius.
Absolute work of genius. Totally agree.
Yeah.
Complete work of genius.
Of course, I love the other ones too. Like, I grew up in the 80s, but that's like Hollywood action movies. That's different.
Yeah. Well, I like Alien, and I like Aliens very much, and I particularly like the Aliens director's cut. Beyond that, I'm not particularly interested in it.
Aliens 3 was actually, I don't think it was that bad. I know it gets a lot of grief, but it was certainly a lot better than what followed. But even between Alien and Aliens, two very different movies. Like, the first one is I think just a fucking work of art as far as horror sci-fi goes. Number two is just, it's a fun fucking Hollywood movie. It's got Bill Paxton and fucking, it's just a classic, but that was very much a, quintessential 80s action sci-fi, whereas the first one was like a kind of this cerebral fucking horror otherness in space thing that no one had ever seen before. That one's truly terrifying to me, to where Aliens, the sequel, isn't necessarily terrifying. It's just kind of badass.
Well, I would say Alien is, when it comes to sci-fi horror, I'd say Alien and the Thing to me are on a par. I think The Thing, over the years, I've grown to love it even more, because I think it's such an extraordinarily well-made movie. And I mean, the practical effects are really, really good, but it's really more about how they build tension and how they keep you guessing in the movie. And it's impeccably well acted. I mean, it's one of those things where, when the phrase, they don't make them like they used to. I mean, it 1000% applies both to Alien and The Thing.
Yeah, absolutely. The original, The Thing is just, brilliant. And of course, all the fucking, both movies, all the practical effects that went into that is just mind-blowing. And I'm still just a fan of practical effects. Like, I'll take that over CG any fucking day, but beyond that, I like a lot of stuff like Possession. I think Possession is a brilliant film. I knew of its existence, but I had not actually watched it until I think a year ago. And maybe it was Carl that pointed me in the direction of, because it was like impossible to find for a while there.
He's been raving about it for probably as long as I've known him. So
yeah, have you seen it?
I haven't. No.
Check it out.
I know I should change that.
It's like almost mind blowing, because I think it came out. It's very early 80s.
Like 1981.
What's the year?
It's 1981.
81. Yeah. Well, I don't want to spoil it for you, so you just have to watch it. But there's scenes in there that you're like, I cannot believe they got away with this in 1981. I think it was actually banned at one point, which wouldn't be surprising at all. But definitely worth checking out. Like that one was pretty amazing. Recommendations I like to throw out. I watch a lot of horror to my detriment, because most of it's fucking absolute garbage these days. But I'll still, I'll still do it in hopes I find a gem. Blackcoat's Daughter, the Blackcoat's Daughter, I think is a fucking masterpiece in its own right. More recently than that, besides the obvious ones like The Witch and Hereditary, which I really liked. There was one that just got overlooked called The Dark and the Wicked. And that goes into very much this kind of like, it's a farm setting. So it goes into like pastoral dread, which is certainly my thing. I was stealing a term here from my buddy Richard Gavin, but that's another one that's worth checking out. And so it's always interesting when you find like a movie within the last couple of years that's actually good.
Yeah,
not just
I have turned for most of my movie viewing and also for most of my TV watching. I've turned to South Korea for my fix, because I find the quality of movie coming out of South Korea is exponentially better than the stuff that is produced by Hollywood, especially for horror, and so too TV shows. I watched a TV show that's on Netflix over here called Copycat Killer. It's a South Korean like serial killer drama, outstanding. I watched another one called All of Us Are Dead, which, you look at it and you kind of go, oh, it's just like a stock standard zombie story, but it's actually genuinely entertaining and well done. There's another one that I want to see.
Do they do Train to Busan? Is that South Korean?
Yeah, Train to Busan is South Korea.
Okay.
The Wailing is South Korea. A couple of others that
The Wailing was great. The Wailing was fucking bizarre and just disturbing. I fucking.
But it's the Wailing, to me, what makes it so great is such an intense movie. Like, especially that last half an hour is extraordinarily intense. And the thing that I love about South Korean films is they're very big on the character's journey, right? You in the Wailing, you meet this father, and he's this bumbling buffoon. I mean, it's almost like Laurel and Hardy level of slapstick comedy with some of the stupid shit that he does at the beginning of the film. And by the end of the movie, he's had to kind of go on his own journey, really to man up, basically, and face what is trying to come after his daughter. And then it has this incredibly dark, morose ending, which is, again, South
with
Korean films tend to be famous for.
Yeah, the camera and the devil.
Yeah.
And there's a couple other South Korean horrors, and now, God, I can't fucking think of the goddamn names. But
depending on people's constitutions, I Saw the Devil.
I Saw the Devil was excellent. Yeah.
Chaser, very, very good. I mean, the one that got me into it was Old Boy, and the whole Vengeance trilogy was
Old Boy is a classic, which I think they remade it. Didn't they do a remake of it?
Spike Lee remade it, though. So that was bound to be trash.
I didn't bother to watch it just because I was like, there's no way it's going to be better than the original.
No, never.
There was one, though, that was about a haunted film. Does this ring a bell? And I can't think of what, and it was a South Korean, really bizarro, and they end up showing the film at the end in the woods, and people end up going crazy. And I wish I could remember the fucking name. That's the problem, is I watch so much of this shit that I don't remember the names.
Yeah, but I mean, either way, I think that I think in terms of like consistent quality, South Korea is definitely where it's at. There's another one that's really good. It's a little older. It's called The Tale of Two Sisters. It came out in 2003. Really cool.
Sounds really familiar.
Yeah, very, very cool haunted house type movie. Incredible sort of build up of tension and suspense. Really, really good. I'm gonna have to look into that. I have to look into that movie that you just mentioned. Now, there is one called Gunjiam Haunted Asylum that came out in 2018. I've only seen the trailer for it, and it looked fucking absolutely insane. It's like it's meant to be like it's found footage, but it's found footage done in a South Korean style. So it's like all bets.
And what was the name of it?
It's called Gunjiam Haunted Asylum.
Okay, that's not the one I'm thinking of. There was another found footage one that was just done in the last year or two that also was really fucking good. And now, just because now my brain's in this fucking stop phase, I'm not thinking of the names here. But it's interesting with the Asian horror, because man, they just seem to fucking nail it, whether it's Japanese or South Korean or whatever. In China, you're not going to get anything because they have laws around.
Well, China is just not China. I think it's Taiwanese. I haven't seen it yet, but it is apparently very, very good. People are saying it's like one of the best horror movies of the year. It's a movie called Incantation. It's on.
That's it. That's the movie I was just thinking of.
Oh, is it Incantation?
Yes.
I'm sure that's Taiwanese and that's not South Korean.
Is it Taiwan? Okay, I was thinking it was South Korean for some reason. No, it's very good. It's got a super sick ending. I won't give it away, but I don't know. It's almost like a cultural thing. Yeah. It's almost like a cultural thing, and like they just know how to really tap into something that it seems like America has lost in horror. Well, and a lot of that's because of fucking Hollywood. Like they don't really give a shit at this point about scripts or stories. They care about, box office sales. And, I was telling my son this. I was like, he wanted to watch The Pope's Exorcist, and my God, was that a fucking piece of shit movie. But
I got 20.
It's like Russell Crowe, and
I got 22 minutes
based on a true story, and I'm like, oh God, this is so fucking stupid.
I got 22 minutes into it, and I switched it off, and I said to Paige, we will be watching The Exorcist. If I'm going to watch a movie about exorcism,
let's go to The Exorcist.
I'm not watching this crap. And we watched The Exorcist, and I was perfectly happy. It was like, this is probably about maybe the 80th or 90th time that I've seen this. It doesn't matter. It's still fucking great.
Me too. Yeah, Exorcist is always. I actually not too long ago. I get insomnia sometimes, and I just watched it at like 3 a.m, which also gives it a nice different effect. Nice sheen there of insomnia, and Exorcist is a good combination. So it goes into the psyche in a different way.
There are a couple of movies coming up that I'm actually quite excited about. Like there seems to be a more interesting lineup of movies on its way than there's been for a while. There's the new David Fincher movie, The Killer, that looks quite interesting. I think this new Scorsese movie, Killers of the Flower Moon, that looks like it could be quite cool. And then there's another one. Yeah, I did see that. Yeah, that looks like it could be quite decent. And then there's another one called The Bike Riders with Tom Hardy that also looks like that could be quite decent. But with
Tom Hardy, okay.
Yeah, and generally,
I like Tom Hardy. I liked it better he's a superb actor. I liked it better when he was more of like doing his British movies than more his Hollywood hit movies. But yeah.
Have you ever seen that movie where the entire movie is just him driving in a car, taking calls on his car speakerphone?
Yes.
And it's
and there's some kind of crisis.
Incredible. Yeah.
What is the crisis? It has something to do with his wife or something. I can't remember what it was now. And he's got a cell phone and
well, he has. Isn't he having an affair or something like that?
Oh, and he's about to be busted having the affair. Something like that. Yeah.
I'm trying to think what that movie is called now, because that was like I thought that was absolutely superb. I was expecting absolutely nothing of it, and then I randomly watched it one day, and I was like, oh, it was called Lock or Locky or whatever.
Yeah. Did you ever see Taboo?
No.
That was it was a series he did. It didn't last. It was like had one season, but that's another one we're checking out where he plays his best style of role as terrifying Tom Hardy, intimidating Tom Hardy. And he does a good job with that. Just kind of when he played Bronson.
Yeah, Bronson is excellent. I thought he was very good in The Drop as well. I thought he was very good in Dunkirk. I really liked Dunkirk. I thought that was a fantastic movie. And I actually quite enjoyed Mad Max Fury Road as well. Yeah,
I did too. And like it was cheesy, but it was in the good way.
Yeah. And if you have I didn't watch it at the cinema, but I have a fucking obscene setup over here. So if you have the right setup here to be able to watch it and, kind of enjoy it, it's a fun movie. I'm also going to assume, given that you're a man of good taste, that you share Carl and my passion for The Exorcist 3, which to me is just the Exorcist 3 to me is one of the greatest movies ever made, one of the best horror movies ever made. And just the idea that Jason Miller, obviously unfortunately has passed away, is absent from any new Exorcist movies, to me, like it's not an Exorcist movie. If it doesn't star Jason Miller, it's not an Exorcist movie. I don't think you should legally be allowed to call it an Exorcist movie.
No, I'm totally with you. And it's kind of funny though, because I hadn't seen that since I was like 13 years old. And so Carl was like, what the fuck? Like, and so I went back and watched it recently and I was like, damn, this is actually pretty superb.
Yeah, no,
it's wildly different from the original Exorcist, which, still is my bread and butter as far as that goes. But no, it was very good. The only later installment of The Exorcist that's worth even watching.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. And then as far as newer horrors are concerned, one horror I did really enjoy last year was Pearl. And again, I think I liked X, which was kind of the first movie that Ty West did, and then he did Pearl as a preview, or not preview, prequel.
Oh,
and I thought that was really cool.
More like a slasher film. Like it reminded me almost like of the 80s slashers, which I liked, kind of a nostalgic retro vibe going on there. So, but another one, this one's not new that I always recommend, which is a Bizarro film, but Beyond the Black Rainbow. Are you familiar with that one?
No. Not
okay. Are you familiar with Mandy?
I am. Yeah.
Okay, same guy, but way before, years and years and years before Mandy. It's far better than Mandy. I like Mandy. Mandy's a weird ass fucking movie, but this one is way better in my opinion. But he also did an installment on the Guillermo del Toro's Cabinet of Curiosities. That same guy has an episode called The Viewing. That's also worth checking out. So all of his have these 80 retro LSD kind of sheen to his horror, which I dig,
I'll definitely give that a look. I enjoyed Mandy very much, but I wasn't familiar with Beyond the Black Rainbow. That's 2010, I can see.
Yeah, check it out. It's a bizarre movie. And another one that I ended up watching, like, again, because I couldn't fucking sleep, and this is forever ago when I watched it. And I just saw the cover and with the title, I was like, what the fuck is this? Like knowing nothing about it, and watched it and, late night, couldn't sleep. And I was like, it just struck a chord with me. And now it's one of my favorite movies. Awesome soundtrack too. If you're into retro 80s synth shit, like, anybody that's like even into something like Perturbator would probably appreciate it.
Well, you also mentioned Hereditary. Not only does that have an incredible score, but fucking what a movie! I remember seeing that pretty much. I think it was either sold out or very close to being sold out. The last 15 minutes of that movie, like the visceral reaction that you could hear in that audience. I've never ever seen an audience respond to a movie like that before. Like people were fucking terrified. Like from the second that you see Toni Collette crawl over the ceiling. It's like
which is hard to pull off these days because it's become kind of a trope. I was almost about to say, me and my son were talking shit about the Exorcist Pope or the Pope's Exorcist because we were talking shit because we're like, watch, there's gonna be some chick crawling up a fucking wall, right? Because it's such a cliche, and it's been which was a great idea at first, but they pulled it off. It's like with the lighting and how she was recessed into you could almost miss that scene, if you're not paying attention. And so that obscurity,
that's what made it so. I was about to say that's what made it so effective is that she's so obscure that when she moves, it's like it's a real jolt. It's like Jesus Christ!
You're like, what the fuck was that? Yeah. And see, this is what these Hollywood producers don't understand is like, don't do the fucking, lifted right out of the brand new Doom video game CG demon with its wings spreading in flames. That doesn't do anything for. I'm surprised it does anything for anybody. Like it's fucking stupid. Do something. You have to put a level of ingenium into the shot itself and the execution, and have a level of obscurity, to where it's believable. It has to be believable, otherwise it's just whatever. Fucking. I lost my train of thought there. Which movie were we talking about just before
Hereditary.
that?
Before that, we were talking about Beyond the Black Rainbow.
Well, with Hereditary, I went into that movie and I knew all the hype around it, but I had no idea what it was about. None. But I think that served me well. And then of course I got excited because at some point I have this knack for figuring out movies. Usually that one was a little hard to guess where that one was fucking going. But I did see once they started actually showing the sigil work, I was like, oh, that's from Lesser Key of Solomon. And so then I got really invested early on. I was like, oh shit, this is like someone did their research and this is an occult movie. And they're leveraging, like the Lemegeton or Lesser Keys of Solomon, and this is going to be a Prince of Hell type thing. And I was so excited that I just want to like tell everybody that I was watching it with, like, oh, but you can't because then you ruin it. I'm like, oh, I know what this is. I know what this is. Yeah. And so those kind. Another one that did that for me was A Dark Song. Did you see that one?
That sounds so super familiar, but I can't place I can't place it at the moment. But yeah, no, go ahead and talk about that some more.
Well, so that's A Dark Song is it's another very occult based, a little bit loosely, but I just get super excited about it's based on what's called the Abremelin rite in the book.
Oh, okay, I'm looking at it now, and I haven't seen it, but I will definitely check it out.
Well, that one was a bit different because I just come across it and I was like, oh, they made a movie about the Bremelin working. I was like, this is going to be my thing. So I like when at least they do some of their research. It was the same with The Witch. When I went into The Witch, I saw it like, I don't think it was opening day, but it was like shortly thereafter. And I was blown away with, there's so much context within The Witch that is drawing directly from the kind of European witch folklore that your average person is going to have no fucking idea what it means, but they didn't bother to explain it either. And so I was like, of course I'm thrilled because I'm like, the fucking jackrabbit is the witch's fetch. They're like, it's a scene with a jackrabbit, and people are like, what's the fucking jackrabbit? I'm like, I know what the jackrabbit is, so I'm getting all totally stoked on that. I've got this, hidden knowledge of what's going on in the movie here. And, when they're churning the baby fat or the witches, and it's like, she's making the witch's ointment, the flying ointment. And that's part of that folklore, and I was like, but they don't explain it. There's no dialogue that comes in and goes, that's what they're doing. You either know or you don't know.
Which is what makes it that much more effective, right? Because it assumes that if you don't know, in a way, it makes it almost more impactful or more terrifying, kind of like Hereditary, right? I think that ending on Hereditary, part of what makes it so effective is that for a lot of people, it is going to just come out of nowhere. They would imagine typical Hollywood movie. His mom is possessed by devils. He kills her, and the end. Not, he ends up in a tree with his, seeing his sister's decapitated head, on an altar, and a person explains to him that he's been. I can't even remember the whole line, but I just remember just getting goosebumps seeing that ending because it was just. It was just from total left field.
Yeah, and it's specific to Paimon, which is from the Lesser Keys of Solomon, and so an infernal spirit. But so that's pretty interesting. And same with the witch. Like at the end, like all of a sudden it was like, the man in black appears, and the man in black is an important figure even in Oculus, and that's a folklorish representation of the devil, but also seems to appear in hypnagogic sleep paralysis visions. And so like the man in black appears anyhow, and then there's the signing of the black book, and that's where you sign your soul to the devil. So the guy, and so I was like whoever fucking came up with this must be heavily invested in European witchcraft. Not the case. He just did a lot of research is what he did, and he did it well.
So maybe let's wrap up by talking a little about, if you're happy to do so, like you mentioned the theme and some of the ideas for the new Oculus record is kind of already manifested. Can you share any of what some of that is going to be?
Yeah, I've already let a lot of it slip anyhow, as I tend to do. So it's funny because I was super obsessed with this one concept. Going back even before COVID that I wanted to do. And I ended up doing Melinoe, and then I kind of put it off. So I was like, I'll do this next. And this concept was what I dub the pandemonic mirror. And so I was kind of going at that, and then I don't remember when it started happening, but came up with a second concept that was based on dreams, like as a lot of my stuff is, and it had such weight and prevalence to it that I decided, like, I'm going to put this on the back burner again and go with this idea. And so basically, it's the concept is, and will likely be, the album title is The House of the Black Geminis. And so Geminis is, of course, like a twin, right? Your other. And it was something that I was ruminating on from my more significant dreams and nightmares, is the symbol of the house, like the abode, right? And so in a lot of, and probably a lot of everyone's dreams, but a lot of my dreams, you are in a house, right? And sometimes the house is typically for me, it's supposed to be my house. Sometimes it kind of is, like it's like the house I grew up in as a child. A lot of the significant nightmares I had as a child had to do with my house. But that the house itself almost becomes its own presiding spirit. Like it has its own like anima to it, you know? And so I started thinking about this idea of the symbol of the house. And then it started resonating through other things. Like I was just thinking like how the house itself is such an important symbol, even in horror in general. Carl and I were talking about this. We were talking about Salem's Lot. I was like, what's the real presiding spirit in Salem's Lot? Like, what is the most ominous thing that casts its shadow over the town? It's not the vampire. It's the fucking house that he lives in, you know? And just how the symbol of the house strikes such a deep nerve with us. It's your sanctuary, but it could also be a very dreadful thing. Like when you see a lone or abandoned house, right? Or you start getting into the concepts of the haunted house. It's alive. One of my favorite writers, John Paget, who was an understudy of Thomas Ligotti, who's, you know, a superb and very famous horror writer. But he, in one of his stories, and wish I could remember which one it was, he framed up the haunted house in like that houses basically gather all the energy of the people that live within those walls, live and die within those walls over time. And he says that, you know, that they form their own autonomous spirit. And he said, and houses dream. And he's like, because you know, autonomous spirits are going to dream. And he's like, and sometimes they have nightmares. And when they have a nightmare, that's when hauntings occur. And I was like, that's fucking brilliant idea. Like brilliant idea. So I started tying all these things together. And then I decided to put it into like a cosmogony in a traditional sense of the house being divided into three hierarchies. So you have the attic, and then you have the middle area, which is usually where people would preside. I'm relegating to the hearth because traditionally the hearth was kind of in the living space, and the hearth had a lot of connotation around not only life-giving, but also was a place where the spirits of the ancestral dead would manifest within the fire of the hearth. And this has significance in my own dreams where I've been in these house type abodes. And then beneath that is the cellar, right? Or the basement, which is very dreadful place. But so is the attic. Like the attic, for some reason, the attic and the cellar innately, I think to almost anyone, they're a bit dreadful. And I think, and then you got to wonder why are these places dreadful? Like grandma's attic, or, whatever, the cellar in the house that you grew up in, and they're because they're liminal spaces. They're liminal spaces. They're not places where people typically set up their bedroom or live. They're the shunned corners, that are cloistered with forgotten things or whatever. So I decided to set it up in this hierarchy, and this hierarchy reflects a traditional hierarchy of like the Imperium or Celestial above, the middle ground, which is like where you inhabit, right? And then the underworld. And so that's how I'm setting up this whole concept. So I'm going to do the entire album on acts. So it's going to be like Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. And it's going to be divided this way based on the house within this dream context. And within this house, so in my dreams, when I find myself in the house, it's a reoccurring dream. And there is a presiding spirit that is almost one and the same with the house, but it's also usually somewhat localized within the house. It's this dreadful presence of otherness, this uncanny otherness. And typically for me, it's usually in the cellar or basement. And in these dreams, I always feel compelled. You would think it would be otherwise, but I'm compelled to move towards that, right? Even though it's horrifying. Even though it's horrifying, you're compelled towards it. And some of these dreams have connotation. When I was a child, I was levitating. And I couldn't stop myself. So I'd be going down the stairs and towards the open door that went to the basement, those kind of things. As an adult, it's a bit different. I willfully seem to want to enter into this kind of mania and madness of going towards this thing. And where the hearth level would be a lot, how I'm interpreting this is in many of my dreams, like one more recent one I had, I was trying to reach this area and I'm going down like hallways and it's just like one, and it's like protein. It keeps changing and keeps growing and keeps growing. And, the irony there is I'm trying to reach this dreadful thing. That's my goal. And I'm having trouble reaching it. And so it's kind of a confrontation with like one's otherness, this dark spirit of the self. At least that's how I interpret it. And I'm drawing a lot upon stuff like James Hillman, who was like kind of in the wheelhouse of Carl Jung, and he wrote a lot on dreams within this context. Dreams in the Underworld is a great book of his. Pan and the Nightmare was another one that he did that was a huge influence on Melinoe. But anyhow, digressing here. But yeah, that's the whole idea. That's my whole fucking mad fucking idea that I've come up with is the House of the Black Geminis, and this whole structure and how
it's a very fertile creative ground though, because a lot of people dream about their childhood home. And I mean, I've read up about what it could be. And I know one of the things that it could potentially mean is you're trying to claim some degree of control over certain elements of your past. Some of it is trying to escape trauma. And interestingly, when you were talking about the home, like for me, when I think of the kind of horror that's always, has struck more a chord with me than others, it has always been the theme of intrusion. So like I've always felt like, so something that's a little bit more gritty, like, or certainly more true to life, like Silence of the Lambs, will do a lot more for me than I'm trying to think now. Well, it would do a lot more for me than a movie like. Maybe not Alien, but I mean, even Alien has that theme of intrusion, right? They're meant to be in the safe, of course, the safe spaceship. There's something there's an entity in there that shouldn't be there. That is ultimately intruding. I mean, I'm thinking out loud now, but again, as I said, I can start to see, I can see what you're driving at, and as I said, I think it's great because of the degree to which people can relate to that theme in a lot of different ways, and in ways that are extremely personal to them.
Yeah. I'm sorry, skipped a beat there for a second, but yeah, no, I gotcha. But and I think what's interesting to me, Silence of the Lambs is very horrific. I think what interests me though the most is this idea of what you just said, entity. And so entity invokes a different kind of fear, a different kind of dread, and it can go into this non-discursive dread that you can't quite comprehend what it is. Because it's beyond a dread of just being, like, say, murdered. or harmed. It has this other significance that feels so much more weighty, kind of like, again, William Peter Blatty in The Exorcist. Like, it has this other connotation. This, it is truly the otherness, and that this presiding presence puts you into what a state that is called abjection. And so, that dread is like a metaphysical dread. And so it's like, that's hard to articulate. I think who articulates the best is Rudolf Otto. I don't know if you're familiar with Rudolf Otto, but he was a Christian, but he had written about this, and even describing it, even with like an encounter with something like God, would be a kind of this admixture of awe. Well, you think about the word awe and then awful. And that's where, they're related. That's where it comes from, is the awfulness, is this trembling, overwhelming awe. And it's not necessarily a blissful thing. It's like, if you were to behold the face of God, it would be you would fall to your knees in awe and terror. And the tremendum is the other word, is like, this kind of trembling, overwhelming of this presence that sends you into the state of abjection. And that abject dread is it displaces you. It displaces you to where you lose your concept of your own I, like your own objective self gets it's shifted out of itself. So it's completely terrifying. Anybody that's had a fucking night terror, anybody that's had these things, they probably know at least a fragment of what I'm talking about, where it's so disorienting that you just even forgot who you were. You're just awash in this complete, dread and loss of self. And so these are the concepts that I've always been striking at with Oculus, because these are from my personal experiences from my childhood and then later, where like it's been so fascinating to me. And it's like, I've never seen a ghost in my life. I've never seen something paranormal manifest in like some kind of stark manner. This is the closest thing I've had to what I describe as paranormal, but it's so personally significant that I felt I had to articulate this. And so, that's my medium is music. So that's how I do it. And I want it to be pregnant with that. I like to think that Oculus is so potent because I've taken this genuine approach of like, this is what I'm relaying.
Well, brother, I am very much looking forward to hearing what it's going to sound like. Very much looking forward to everything that you're going to release next year. It's going to be a busy 2024 by the sounds of things.
Yeah.
And great catching up with you again as always, man. Really, really good, and really good to see you doing really well.
Yeah, absolutely, man. It was a total pleasure, man. Fucking always love sitting down and having these intellectual conversations.
Awesome. All right. Hang fire. I'm gonna hit stop. I want to just say something to you when we finish recording. You just listened to Ephialtes by Akhlys off of the album Melinoe, first released by Debimo Morty Productions on December the 14th, 2020. Without exaggeration, in my opinion, the best, or one of the best black metal albums of the 21st century. It is absolutely sensational. And what a pleasure having had Naas back on the podcast. I hope you guys enjoyed that as much as I did. We will welcome him back to the show at some point in the near future, no doubt. And definitely looking forward to 2024 and seeing what creatively he has in store for us. In the meantime, I'll post the link to the Akhlys Bandcamp in the description to the podcast. So if you haven't yet checked out Melinoe, which I'm going to guess is a very, very small number of you listening to this, then do go over there, buy yourself some music, and let Nars and the gang know that it was old Jackson at Into the Necrosphere who sent you. Right, let's discuss some new music now, and we are going to start off with the self-titled return of Sweden's premier suicidal black metal purveyors, Shining, who are back with their first full-length in 5 years. Now, it is generally a statement of intent, at least that is the belief that I hold, when a band name a record after themselves, and for Shining to be doing so on album number 12 after a 5-year absence seems to indicate a rejuvenation of sorts. Musically, the tracks that they offer here build from the sonic foundation laid by its most immediate predecessor, so you should expect plenty of acoustic guitar and a lot of clean singing spliced into mostly mid-tempo black metaling. There is also a really beautiful piano interlude that sets up the vicious closer Den Permanente Somnen Collar perfectly. It is not Marduk, therefore, so if you're expecting blasting and chaos and insanity, Shining is not really going to be up your street. But if you've been a long-time fan of Shining's brand of blackened despair, then prepare to have this release on your regular rotation for probably the indefinite future. Shining is available right now on Napalm Records. Next up, we have Mayhem's new live records, Demonic Rites, and that is out right now on Century Media. With the exception of Slayer's Decade of Aggression and SOD's absolutely awesome live at Budokan, I don't usually spend much time listening to live albums personally, but I have to say Demonic Rites to me is a release I could easily see being added to that very small list of live records that I just mentioned for the foreseeable future. It is essentially a career retrospective recorded on their recent tour. It runs the gamut of classics, everything from Freezing Moon and Life Eternal to newer stuff like Malum and Falsified and Hated. Esoteric Warfare and Ordo Archeo is not represented, I believe, at all on the album, which I think you can probably have expected, but the rest of the track selection overall is great. The mix is fantastic. It really gives off that live energy that ironically is so lacking to me on many live records, and as you can hear from the mix, from the way it was recorded, every member of the band is in absolutely sensational form. I would say particularly Hellhammer on the drums and Attila manning the microphone. One of the personal highlights for me about this is that they also include what is now their standard encore of Death Crush, Chainsaw Gutsfuck, Carnage, and Pure Fucking Armageddon, which at least for me brings back great memories of seeing them do that live on the 2019 Incineration Festival. Moving on, we have Polar Veil by Hexvessel, serious members of the Legion. In other words, those of you who listen to the weekly news rant in its entirety will undoubtedly have taken note of the fact that my excitement about this record has grown with every single that they have put out so far, and I am pleased to say that the end result most definitely does not disappoint. So Hexvessel are known for being unpredictable, and on this album, one of the first things that you notice is that a lot of the folk influences from their earlier records has been stripped way back in favor of a wholehearted embrace of black metal. That point is really hammered home on the album's opening track. There's a sequence towards the end of the song. The song in question, of course, is The Tundra is Awake. That sequence could just as easily have been at home on Burzum's Philosophem as it is here. Elsewhere, Hexvessel evoke a barely disguised worship of Bathory on the brilliant track Eternal Meadow, and on the final song, Homeward Polar Spirit, you're basically presented with a vision of what Dark Throne might have sounded like with clean singing instead of screams. Make no mistake about it, this new album by Hexvessel is definitely not for everyone, and there may be some of you who are listening to this review right now scratching your head as to why I enjoy the record in the first place, but if you're after something unique, dark, challenging, and dripping with really ice-cold, wintry atmosphere, you owe it to yourself to listen to Polar Veil. I think it is an absolute masterpiece, and it is out right now, courtesy of the folks at Svart Records. So finally, we move on to what is definitely going to be one of this year's biggest releases, and I'm talking, of course, of Chaos Horrific by Cannibal Corpse. It is an album that proves once again that bringing Eric Rutan into the fold was perhaps one of the greatest recruitment decisions that Cannibal Corpse ever made. And as the hype has been steadily building up around this album, with the release of a couple of singles, I believe they put out Summoned for Sacrificed and Bloodblind, I can happily tell you that the hype was well placed. The album starts off with the very self-referential Overlords of Violence that has this really cool bass line that kind of kicks it off, almost hinting back a little bit at the opening to Hammer Smashed Face. From there on, it's Frenzied Feeding, as well as the single I just mentioned, Summoned for Sacrifice. Summoned for Sacrifice, I've got to say, has such a neck-snapping groove that I would be very, very surprised if from year forward it is not guaranteed a spot on basically every Cannibal Corpse set list ever to be played again. Another highlight for me, a track called Vengeful Invasion, absolutely crushes, particularly in the last 60 seconds, where it has a beatdown that is so effective it should have come with a warning label. The real genius of Chaos Horrific, though, is not just to me that it has a bunch of great songs or that there are plenty of highlights, but it's the fact that after 16 albums, Cannibal Corpse has once again proven that they're able to create an album that is not just pleasing to listen to, but where each song has its own distinctive personality. I've mentioned previously that The Wretched Spawn is probably my all-time favorite Cannibal Corpse album, and this is coming from someone whose love for Cannibal Corpse stretches deep into the Chris Barnes era. But I am ready to declare that Chaos Horrific is by far the best thing that they have produced since that record. I'm going to play one of my favorite songs off the album for you right now. This is a track called Drain You Empty.
Your word is
That was a track called Drain You Empty by Cannibal Corpse off their brand new record Chaos Horrific. It's available right now on Metal Blade Records, and as per usual, the link to the Cannibal Corpse Bandcamp is in the description to the podcast to encourage you to head over there and buy yourself some music and demand that Alex Webster, George Corpse Grinder, Eric Rutan, or frankly anybody from the band show their face on Into the Necrosphere in the very near future. A few quick mentions of a couple of other new releases that are on my radar, but I've not yet spent enough time with them to speak about them meaningfully on the podcast. Still, though, you do need to take note. Rebellion have put out a new album called Under the Sign of Rebellion. Ken Mode's new record Void is out. They are always excellent and always good value. Profanatica's new record Crux Simplex, I know, is getting a lot of love from the Legion. And then if you're into hardcore of the manly variety, the new Freya record is well worth checking out. Freya, of course, features Carl from Earth Crisis, and there's no wimpy stuff on there whatsoever. Speaking of manliness, if you're a grown man and you still play with Pokemon cards, then it's time for you to get to stepping, because this is my weekly news rant.
Round them up for judgment. And hang them where the world can see.
Right, folks, we are going to kick off with the spicy stuff. On Metal Storm, they are reporting Thy Art is Murder, split with vocalist CJ McMahon. It says here, the Australian deathcore formation Thy Art is Murder shared news that they have parted ways with vocalist CJ McMahon. Full statement from the band can be read down under. Now, long story short about this, for those of you guys that haven't been following the saga, apparently CJ posted a comment on a video that Matt Walsh had posted. Matt Walsh, of course, the very controversial podcaster who is with the Daily Wire. The comment was in response to a video about a woman who is seen to be affirming or potentially even encouraging her child's claim that they belong to two genders, and CJ posted something along the lines of burn her to death. It's a difficult one, this, because I have said many times before, I am, without a shadow of a doubt, a free speech absolutist. I do think that what CJ did was a little bit tone deaf, in the sense that he should almost surely have realized that making something like that public, if you're in a band that has the profile that Thy Art is Murder has, was going to create a huge amount of blowback, and not only for him, but certainly for almost everybody in the band and everybody connected to the band. And so from that perspective, I think it was selfish. I think it was, very poor judgment. At the same time, I've read a lot of comments on the Thy Art is Murder forums and on their Facebook page where people are saying, you're singing about, murder and death, but, a guy posts something that you don't agree with and you kick him out of the band. I kind of see that point too. I've spoken before on the show about the fact that I don't think it's necessarily a good thing that there are some topics now in our society that are so sensitive, or, around which such a taboo exists, that, anybody who even dares to question it from a reasonable perspective or from a, intellectually curious perspective runs the risk of, having their personal and professional reputation destroyed. I think that actually ties into what I spoke to Nars about when it came to, the role of compelled speech in governing society and in controlling the populace. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of questions swirling around this. One question that I also have is around the legitimacy of whether or not CJ's vocals were actually removed, because I've got to tell you, so my understanding is they made the announcement about him being booted out of the band on the day that the record came out, but there was a ton of stuff that they released prior to the album coming out. I mean, and we're talking like 2-3 months in advance. We listened to some of it on the news rant. Presumably that featured CJ McMahon's vocals. I've gone back and I've listened to some of those songs on Qobuz and Spotify and YouTube Music, and I've compared them to the music videos, and they don't sound any different to me whatsoever. So I don't know whether there's a little bit of a shim-sham being pulled on us here, but for my money, if you had to put a gun to my head and say, is CJ McMahon the vocalist on the new Thy Art is Murder, then I would say you goddamn right he is. I've seen comments about, the dude from Molotov Solution being on, and, various other folks apparently being on. I don't think I've gotten to the point where my hearing is that bad yet that I've become like my, my high school teachers that said, all that metal, all that death metal sounds the same. It's just a bunch of people barking. So yeah, as far as CJ being taken off the album, I must be honest. You guys can correct me if I'm wrong. Let me know in the comments, but I'm not so sure about that. And in full disclosure, you're going to find that in just a flash, if you're watching this on YouTube, I'm going to change to wearing a different t-shirt, because I had recorded a take on this originally, and I was lying in bed on this is Monday, the night before the episode is meant to drop that I'm recording this. I was lying in bed thinking, like, have I missed something here? And I went back and I re-listened to the songs. I do not see a difference between the vocal takes. So anyway, yeah, that's my opinion. I don't, as I said, I do not think that there should be anything in society. I frankly don't think anything or any belief or any idea that is in any way with merit, has any merit or any substance or any virtue even, should be beyond scrutiny, or should be even beyond jokes or beyond satire. And I also don't think that a group of people who, and I do believe when it comes to, you know, when it comes to this topic in particular, I think this is a fringe group. I don't necessarily think it's representative of everybody, but I certainly think it's not right when people threaten folks who differ from them with murder and with rape and with all sorts of sick shit, and then they are still seen as the good guys. People that threaten folks with murder and with rape aren't good. So anyway, you wanted my take on Thy Art is Murder. That is my considered take at 10:33 on a Monday night. Okay, let's move on to some actual music now. And Bezeker Legion have launched a lyric video for a new song called Choirs of Anguish. It says here, death metal operatives Bezeker Legion are unveiling a lyric video for Choirs of Anguish, the newest advanced single of their forthcoming long player, Chaos Will Reign. The video was made by the great Carl Dusselgy. Let's give this a quick listen. That verse, I think, is absolutely fantastic. If memory serves me correctly, Chaos Will Reign is the second record by Bezeker Legion. And I remember that because I remember hearing the first album and I thought it was reasonably entertaining, but, you know, I wasn't completely bowled over by it. But this track to me sounds like a big step forward. I love the groove. I like that melody. I think the vocals sound very, very cool. And for me, the thing that I'm enjoying almost the most is that really simple riff during the verse, because it just works. And you know, I'll get back to it in a second, but let's give it another 60 seconds. So on that riff during the verse, I think people really underestimate how difficult it is to pull off something simple like that without it sounding unimaginative, uncreative, or just boring. I mean, there's a lot of big bands that do it. You know, dare I say it, Amon Amarth being one of them. You know, and again, for me, like when you do something that simple, it just doesn't sound like you have mastery over your craft. Let's put it that way. Let's be charitable. And we've heard a ton of bands, as I said, on this very new segment doing that, but I think Bezeker Legion absolutely knock it out of the park. I think part of what makes it so cool is they kind of split the verse into two, and it's that second part where they're not palm muting as much, where the double bass is kicking in. It just sounds fucking awesome. And then they really, you know, add a lot in with that melody during the chorus as well. I mean, this isn't my usual style of death metal that I enjoy. And I think if it's, Dying Fetus or or similar that you're after, or that is kind of your main tipple when it comes to death metal, then, maybe this won't be for you. But I'm a big fan of Dying Fetus, as you all know, and I think this is great. So thumbs up for me. Well done, Bezeker Legion. And looking forward to hearing the rest of that record. Okay, friends, let's move on. Devenial Verdict are working on new material. I had the chaps from Devenial Verdict on the podcast early in the year. What a phenomenal record that was and still is. And I hate to repeat myself on the news rant, but as I've said many times before, what a time to be a death metal fan. I mean, if you think about the newer bands that are coming out, putting out just top tier, fantastic new stuff, and then you've got like the old guard that are putting out some of the best music of their careers, Dying Fetus, Cryptopsy, Cannibal Corpse. I'm excited to hear what the new Deicide is going to sound like. You are, as a death metal fan in 2023, you are so spoiled for choice, it is unbelievable. Okay, next up we've got Asagraum, who have dropped a new single. It says to shorten the wait until the official release of their new record, Veil of Death Ruptured, black metal formation Asagraum present the next new track in preview, Devansen Roept Mijn Naam. Let's give it a quick spin. By the way, I can use the powers of my Afrikaans fluency to directly translate Devansen Roept Mijn Naam for the 39.7% of my audience who are in the States and probably don't speak Dutch. Frankly, actually, the vast majority of my audience probably doesn't speak or understand Dutch. But that name translates to "The Madness Calls My Name." By the way, on the topic of powers bestowed upon those with Afrikaans fluency, sadly, those powers let down my beloved Springboks against Ireland at the Rugby World Cup this past weekend. And I also think that if the Springboks had listened to Asagraum in the locker room, both before and at the half-time mark of the game, perhaps the outcome would have been a little different. On a serious note, though, to my Irish listeners, your boys absolutely deserved it. What a game. You guys may have heard me talk about rugby on this show and wondered what the appeal is. Saturday's encounter is, to me, one of the very best levels of that sport being played at the highest of high levels. It was absolutely sensational. And again, congratulations to Ireland. Hopefully we meet again in the finals, but we'll see. I have a hunch that the Springboks are going out in the quarterfinals this year because it seems like we're on track to face France. France right now just seem to be, playing at they're playing on a different level. They also have home field advantage. So anyway, now speaking of highest levels, I am also loving what I'm hearing from Asagraum here. I know that Veil of Death Ruptured is going to be their third album. I know the two previous records. From what I can tell, based on this song, third record may well be their best. I think there's a great balance between speed and atmosphere, and when it slows down, there's something almost psychedelic about those melodies, and I think it just really, really works well. So let's get back to it. Honestly, this song is just getting better and better. I know we're only at the 2.5 minute mark. We're not quite at the halfway point of the song yet, but I mean, that is fucking brilliant. The vocals, I think, are another big tick in the box for me. They sound really powerful. They, you know, they've got like a bottom end. They're ballsy. They feel purposeful. They also sound essential to the overall presentation, which can sometimes be a gripe of mine when it comes to certain black metal, as you know. I don't like those tumbled Raya vocals that just sound like it's wind blowing in the studio rather than something that's actually being treated like a separate instrument, which again, that's my view on how vocals should be used in extreme music, regardless whether it's death metal, black metal, doesn't matter to me. But I love it. I think it's very, very good. And again, Asagraum, it's fucking crazy the way that this year is closing out. I mean, we already have a ton of really, really good stuff that's been released. Enough that I could comfortably, if the year ended right now, not even comfortably, I would have trouble putting together a top 30. But now, all of these little bands are coming out of the woodwork. I say little bands. I don't mean that disrespectfully, but lesser known bands, I should say, are coming out of the woodwork, and it's like stuff that you didn't expect or you weren't anticipating is just blowing you away. And again, I mean, I don't even know how I'm going to do a top 30 this year. Obviously last year it expanded to the top 30 to accommodate for the fact that there were so many good albums coming out. But this year, I don't know, might have to be a top 50. Anyway, Brutal Assault 2024 info and first wave of bands disclosed. I'll check this out just out of curiosity. I like the look of Brutal Assault. I've never been, unfortunately, but it always looks very cool. So anyway, it says here, the organizers of Brutal Assault Festival have confirmed a first batch of bands for the 2024 edition, which is set for August the 7th to the 10th. Concurrently, a pre-sale of festival tickets has commenced, and the bands they've announced are Architects, boo; Behemoth, boo; Body Snatcher, don't know them; Brutus, don't know them; Emperor, wouldn't mind to see. I did see that Ishon has now said that they're apparently not doing any more new music, which I still had it on good authority that something was going on. It could very well be that they got to the studio, were messing around with ideas and just realized, the chemistry isn't quite there. Again, as I've said before, if they are ever going to do new music, it cannot be another Prometheus. It can't be another Ishon solo record. It has to be Samoth and Ishon writing the music together, the badassness of Samoth's vibe, keeping Ishon's more progressive leanings controlled and tight and focused. If not, don't bother. Left to Die, great. Legion of the Damned, decent. Motionless in White, not a band I enjoy, but we're actually going to talk about something related to them in a little bit. UFO Mammoth, again, no idea who they are, but again, another band whose name just, I don't know, rubs me the wrong way. Anyways, we move on. Taubra have revealed a new single called Derizo. It says here, black metal band Taubra disclose a second taster from the forthcoming album Terizo that is due out on October the 13th, 2023 on Deborah Morty Productions, the always excellent Deborah Morty Productions. Unfortunately, they have given us a Bandcamp link, so let's go check out if we can find it on Metal Storm, and then, not Metal Storm, sorry, on YouTube, and then we'll listen to the song there. So here we go. Terizo, found it. We're going to give it a quick spin. Wow. So there's a bit of an immortal vibe to that first minute of the song. And I say immortal vibe, but let's be honest, Immortal or Abath have not put out anything that good since probably the 90s. Really fast, frenetic, crazy. The drumming sounds like it might be programmed, but they actually do have a drummer credited to the band on Metal Archive. So I don't know, but either way, I think this is fucking sensational. And Deborah Morty's lineup this year, as far as new releases are concerned, has been sensational as per usual. They've put out Bluthaus Nord. Obviously, this is coming out, and Archon has come out. So I mean, they always put out just absolute top tier stuff. They've got that new Amenta EP coming out as well, which is going to be awesome. Very impressive as well. Terizo, as I understand, is this band's debut album, although you do need to contextualize a little bit by adding that everybody in the band does have a lengthy history of being in other bands as well, including Forgotten Tomb, Aura, bands like that. So, but this is absolutely my style of black metal. It's heavy, it's aggressive, it's atmospheric. Every element comes together really perfectly. Let us return to it.
Dried and deformed, worldwide plague, another harvest gone.
Right, I'm gonna have to stop myself while I'll listen to the whole entire song. That is definitely top notch. There's no doubt about it. That is fantastic. Absolutely sensational. I wanted to check out the Deborah Morty Productions channel because I know they've just brought out another project called Urshitu. Urshitu, I believe. And the song is called From Corn to Dust. Now, if I'm not mistaken, I think this may actually feature somebody from Bluthaus Nord, or the man from Bluthaus Nord. So let's give this a quick listen as well. I didn't see it anywhere on Metal Storm, but I've been curious to hear what this sounds like. Holy fuck, that is fantastic. And yes, this does feature Vince Val of Bluthaus Nord. And on vocals, we've got Lars Nedland of Solarfault and Borgnagar. But motherfucker, that sounds magnificent. There's no other words for it. It's got this ritualistic feel to it. It's, black metal. It's kind of familiar, but at the same time, it sounds quite unique. I love the vibe. I love the atmosphere. Yeah, fantastic. Absolutely fucking fantastic. I think I know why I enjoy this so much as well. There's something about this, and maybe it's just in my own head, but there's something about this that reminds me a little bit of Memoria Vetusta 2 Dialogue with the Stars, which was an album Blut aus Nord put out in 2009. And it's sensational. I mean, my favorite Blut aus Nord record is still Cosmosophy. But if I had to pick a second, it would definitely be that. And this album has got something about it, or the song at least I should say, has got something about it that reminds me a little bit of that album. But Vince Vaughn has been a busy dude because he put out Forest back in 2021. That's a great record. He's obviously been super busy with Blut aus Nord, and now he's put out this. So, yeah, more power to him. But, yeah, Ershetu, From Corn to Dust. Do not sleep on this album. The album is called Zibulba, and it's going to be out on October the 27th, 2023. But Deborah Morty definitely finishing off the year in a very fine style indeed. Okay, next up we've got Master's Call, whose debut album is coming out in November. Now, those of you who have been long-time members of the Legion, you'll know that I had John Wilcox of Master's Call on the podcast back on episode 38. And I have to say, along with Trivax, I've always felt that Master's Call were one of the most criminally overlooked bands by labels in the UK. It boggled my mind that they were independent. They have now signed to a record label called Fire Flash Records. So glad for them that has happened, and glad that we're finally getting to hear some new music by them. So it says here, Black Death Metal Commando Master's Call will be releasing their debut full-length A Journey for the Damned on November the 24th, 2023 via Fireflash Records. Additional details and a first preview song entitled The Serpent's Rise can be found below. By the way, a fact that I didn't mention for those of you guys that didn't know, Cheyenne of Trivax used to be the vocalist for Master's Call. before leaving to focus purely on Trivax. So cool that, maybe ironic as well, you could say, that both Trivax and Masters Corp are finally putting out records this year, finally got signed. But yeah, just so you know, and Cheyenne and I are probably going to have another episode, not maybe on Into the Necrosphere, but possibly on Iblis Manifestations in the near future. But anyway, yeah, I really like this. I think it's very, very good. It's kind of what I expected and what I had hoped for. John Wilcox is now doing vocals in the place of Cheyenne. I think he sounds cool. And by the way, if you want to go back and dig up a truly what I think is an underappreciated gem, then check out a record called Thresholds that John put out with his band Funeral Throne, and that was back in 2014. They no longer exist, but that is a fucking sensational record as well. But yeah, for me, this is very cool. I like the music video, like the song, the whole vibe of it is right up my street. So let's get back to it. Definite thumbs up from me, and once again, congratulations to the gentleman from Master's Call for getting signed. And to the labels over here, what the fuck took you so long? Okay, let's do two more on here, and then we'll head over to the Democrats Guide to Rock Music. Autark, I believe is how I pronounce this, have put out a new music video for the song Refocus, which is off their next full-length installment, Emergent. It's due out on November the 10th on Season of Mist. It says here, the music video was filmed, edited, and animated by Spread Design Motion. I remember vaguely listening to their last record, Form in Motion. That record also did not get a lot of love from, the Angry Metal Guy, I think, gave it a really bad review. There were a couple of other places that really hated it. But I didn't think it was too bad. So I'm curious to hear what Refocus sounds like. You can definitely hear that these guys have enjoyed a few Devin Townsend records in their day, especially when it comes to that really layered wall of sound style approach that they're taking. But it's, of course, a lot darker than anything Devin has put out. I mean, so far, I've not heard any, happy metal nonsense like the crap that he's sullied his good name with over the course of the last couple of years. But there's also elements of Godflesh, and as much as I hate to say it, Fear Factory, but like those rare moments where Fear Factory doesn't suck, you can hear that come through as well, alongside a couple of other stuff. But yeah, I think this is pretty cool. Don't notice a drummer on the music video, which if they played live, you can't have this kind of music without a drummer, I don't think. Like even, electronic bands like Comic Christ and Perturbator, they've got drummers on stage, and it actually makes the electronic stuff sound so much cooler when you've got a live drummer playing over it. But yeah, so far so good. I think for those clean vocals, I may have gone a different route if I were them. You know, again, either getting a get a guest vocalist in, or at least double track or triple track the vocals. Just do something to kind of make them sound a little bit bigger. I don't think they terrible. Like, we've heard clean vocals on the news rant which were downright fucking god awful, and they ruined the song completely. I wouldn't say this ruins the song, but it like I said, it just could have had it could have a bit more body to it. Like, I feel like it doesn't have enough. I don't think his clean vocals as they are presented there necessarily have the presence to carry the song like you would want them to. So yeah, just a minor comment, but other than that, this is not bad at all, and I'll definitely give the album a listen when it comes out. Okay, let's do one more, and spoiler alert, I think we all know this is going to be a great song. It's another single off the new Sulphur Aeon record. The album is going to be called 7 Crowns and 7 Seals. I damn near soiled myself listening to it on the news rant, or listening to the first single on the news rant a couple of weeks ago, as some of you may recall. I am so fucking excited about this, I cannot tell you, but yeah, let's give this a listen. The song in question is called Usurper of the Earth and Sea, and a reminder that 7 Crowns and 7 Seals is going to be out on Van Records on October the 13th. Every single thing I've heard off this record so far suggests to me that this is another one of those albums that's just going to make it incredibly hard to come up with any sort of top 30. I would actually say doing the bigger list I don't find as difficult. It's getting it down to that top 10, because there are so many bands this year that deserve to be in that top 10. Like, there's a prestige to being in the top 10, and this sounds like it could be a contender without a doubt. That previous single that they put out, Arcane Cambrian Sorcery, was fucking 10 out of 10. And this sounds very close. I know we're only 1 minute 17 seconds in, but it's all the trademarks, everything I need to love blackened death metal band is there.
Behold this legion, as the dreamer commands. Sing thou an holy servant of the end that's nigh. Of the end that's nigh.
nice little bit of soloing there as well. And I enjoyed the feedback, by the way, that I got for last week's 6 of the best solo list. Unfortunately, we are the pit this week, and this is partly why I made the Pokemon joke at the start of the news rant. Their top 10 list this week is the most metal Pokemon of all time. I'm sorry, but I know that some people might be into it. I just don't. I don't think personally that Pokemon is something that a grown man should be spending their time with. And I see a worrying number of people on metal Twitter and Facebook and stuff like that. Guys that are in their 30s and 40s that are still busy with that shit. So anyway, okay. So Sulphur Aeon. I think we can all agree, and not we can both agree. We can all agree that is top notch. All right, let's head over now to the Democrat's Guide to Rock Music, Blabbermouth, and we'll skim through some of the news items here. Mastodon's Bill Kellier. Next year, we're going to write a new record. I hope it is going to be better than the steaming pile of shit that they put out called Hushed and Grim, because it's a blight on that band's catalog. I'm a massive fan of Mastodon. I've always been, going all the way back to Remission. I have been there for the ups and the downs for that band, the changes in sound, different directions with everything, but it's Hushed and Grim. There was just no salvaging it. It was just complete shit. It's a good example of that bubble of success, or that bubble that's built around successful bands, where I think you end up just being surrounded by too many people that are afraid to tell you that your shit stinks. And so you end up with music that becomes detached from everything else that's coming out, in the sense that it's bands are kind of innovative and are kind of pushing a sound or a style forward, and you just seem to be stuck in one place. Metallica is a good example of that, as is Slipshit. But Mastodon, they've always been unique, so I'd always hoped that they could just forge their own path and not be part of that, but you definitely hear it on Hushed and Grim. Somebody somewhere was sitting in that studio saying, "Yeah, Bill, that's amazing," and even though they knew in their hearts that it was not up to snuff. Next up, we've got Machine Head and Fear Factory members jamming classic songs. I saw that Rob Flynn has put his podcast on ice. No doubt he was terrified by the idea of competing against Into the Necrosphere. Motionless in White frontman on the importance of staying connected with fans on social media. There's actually something specific I want to talk about related to Motionless in White, and some of you guys will be aware of the story, but it's basically about some fucking imbecile who came into a Motionless in White show and brought his golden retriever Labrador with him. So hang fire, I'm just going to find it. I've got the article here on Lambgoat, and it says here, somebody brought a golden retriever into the Motionless in White mosh pit. It says here, at a Motionless in White show on Saturday, September the 16th at the Toyota Pavilion in Montage Mountain in Scranton, PA, it appears someone brought a golden retriever into the mosh pit. A video shot by a fan on TikTok shows the dog being lifted up by the crowd, moving in motion to the song. It isn't clear if the dog was let in as a service animal, though it does not appear the golden retriever was wearing any ear protection. While humans can hear frequencies up to 20,000 hertz, dogs typically have a much wider range, up to 47,000 to 65,000 hertz, according to the American Kennel Club, which when sounds are between 3,000 and 12,000 hertz in frequency, dogs' ears are far more sensitive than ours and can hear those sounds when they are between -5 and -15 decibels quieter on average. I also looked it up, and apparently a dog's hearing is damaged at anything from 70 decibels and above. And from 100 decibels and up, it becomes quite serious. And from all my understanding, or from all the research that I've read, the average decibel level at a metal show is between 90 and 120 decibels. So, notwithstanding the fucking noise that the poor animal was subjected to, you were also surrounded by a bunch of drunken fucking morons, and the dog also had the sensory overload of the stage lights and stuff like that to deal with. Not to mention the fact that it would be undoubtedly highly uncomfortable for that dog to be hoisted up on somebody's shoulders the way that he was. And you can actually see the video. If you were watching this on YouTube, it was playing whilst I was talking. Either way, what it confirms to me is that the person responsible for doing so is a complete and utter piece of human garbage. And more importantly, if I were to take over the world, he would be a great example of why I would immediately reintroduce to every nation and every land the concept of the Singapore-style caning. Because that is the only way that you keep fucking scumbags like that in line. I genuinely, I mean, that to me is that's animal abuse as far as I'm concerned. I think you should be, I think he should be prosecuted as far as I'm concerned, and at a minimum, he deserves an ass kicking. Kudos to the folks from Motionless in White. I think the drummer spoke out about it and said, this is fucked. Why did you do it? So. Anyways, Tom Gabriel Warrior's Triumph of Death announces a live album called The Resurrection of the Flesh. I have to say, personal feelings about Tom aside, I actually am quite looking forward to this. And again, even though I'm not the biggest fan of live albums per se, I am curious to hear these songs, these old songs done in, a fresher take on these old songs, I should say. Some of the songs that are apparently going to be included on the record: Decapitator, Blood Insanity, Crucifixion, Reaper, Messiah, Visions of Mortality, the song Triumph of Death, and others. And actually, it just so happens that they've got Messiah, a clip of Messiah live here. So let's give it a quick listen.
Messiah.
Of course, right before he said Messiah, he said, "I just want to say, Jackie Smith at Into the Necrosphere, this one goes out to you for the animals." Vegan for the animals.
Messiah.
That sounds fucking cool. I mean, there's no... all vegan jokes aside, all jokes about For the Animals aside, there's no getting around it. That is fucking brilliant. So yeah, like I said, I'm very excited to hear this, and I'm usually not somebody that gets particularly excited about live albums, but this one for sure sounds like it's going to be worth many, many spins. I mean, here's an idea. One thing that so even though we have differences in our dietary approach, one thing that Thomas and I do share in common is we both have a love of animals. So let's have Triumph of Death playing in the background whilst we Singapore cane that stupid cunt at the Motionless in White show. and we can perhaps even do it to the beat of the song Messiah. Anyway, folks, on that note, I believe the time has come to wrap up the news rant for this week. My friends, thus concludes episode 197 of Into the Necrosphere. I am back next week with my good friend Kelly Schaefer of Atheist Until the Dirt, and then we are one episode away from the grand milestone, episode 200. Who will be my guest? You will have to wait and see. In the meantime, whatever it is that you're doing, wherever it is that you are, stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll see you bad motherfuckers again next week.